across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Great to have your company today. And whether, I've got to say this, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is always great to have your company. Lots to talk about, as we were just discussing with Ian Collins today. I mean, huge number of topics that, I'm trying to work. I'm genuinely really struggling. Like, what do I want to ask as a question of you today? Here's the thing, though. You know you always get to have your say about what you want to talk about. You have a funny way of deciding it for yourself, whatever I'm thinking. But the main question I want to ask you today is about immigration. And I'm not one of those people who goes, oh, yeah, let's just talk about immigration, it's easy. But I find it extraordinary that Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who a lot of people seem to think is a good egg because she says a lot of the right things, doesn't get much done. But Shabana Mahmood has vowed to take action against sham lawyers who help the bogus asylum seekers who try to stay in Britain by falsely claiming to be gay, or domestic abuse victims, or they used to just do, the ones who turn up and claim to be from the Kurdish minority, and that's why they can't go home, or claim to be Christians or atheists or whatever it is. There's basically an industry out there basically giving these guys, largely men, the information and the documentation they need. There's an industry, a lot of it, by the way, funded by legal aid, by us, taxpayers, a lot of it funded by taxpayers' money going to charities from government, and the charities are all in on it as well. I mean, not all of them, an awful lot of them are. And we're paying for all this absolute madness. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Home Secretary vowing to take action, because I don't believe for a nanosecond the Home Office hasn't been completely aware of this going on, or at the very least hasn't suspected it. I don't really understand why it takes the BBC to do an expose on this, when plenty of journalists, including me and many of the other TV stations, many newspapers, we've been carrying out investigations into this stuff for not just years, for decades. But apparently when the BBC does it, it must be true. I want to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. That's the number to get in touch. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls to charge the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. But I also want to talk about that protest down in Epsom, which saw, again, as we've seen outside the Asylum hotel protests, well, and there have been attacks which have been, the allegation is, and it's turned out with the conviction later to be absolutely true, that it is someone who has come in on a migrant dinghy, who's an asylum seeker, who's turned out to have raped or sexually assaulted either children or young women in a local area. We've seen the police turn out, but the police turned out in riot gear for peaceful protesters, local people, simply just wanting to have their say in Epsom in Surrey. Why did police turn out? Well, because they didn't like the fact, let's be honest, they thought there might be trouble from these people because they were demanding descriptions of a number of men, we don't know how many, who are alleged to have gang raped a young 20-year-old woman around 2 a.m. as she left a nightclub in Epsom a few days ago. Now, police have called out for any help with this. They've asked for CCTV, they've asked for any witnesses, anyone walking down the street, anyone who might have seen anything, to get in touch. The one thing they have decided not to do, though, we think decided, rather than not knowing, is to give us a description of the alleged perpetrators. Men, because it's accusation of rape, definitely. What colour are they? Are they young? Are they old? Are they fat? Are they thin? Do they have beards? Are they bald? Did anyone hear them speak? Did they speak English? Did they speak English with an English accent or a non-English accent? I mean, these are reasonable things for us to want to know. And one would have thought, given that the complainant, the alleged victim of this rape, has spoken to the police and is in the care of the police, that they would have at least some of that information. Have they not asked her? If there are gang rapists on the loose in Epsom, is it not reasonable for the people of Epsom, not just women, but the parents of young girls, wanting to know whether the streets are safe? But the police have stayed zipped up and stumm. Is it because they don't know? Really? They haven't asked the woman? Did she not have any information at all? If they were wearing balaclavas and gloves, that would be useful information to know, would it not? But no, we've got nothing. But of course, just asking that question makes you a bad person, doesn't it? I want to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. 7 minutes past 10 is the time. Delighted to say that Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, is here with us, as he is always, on a Thursday. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you.
We've got lots more to talk about, including the Supreme Court's gender ruling 1 year on. We've also going to be talking about Israel and Lebanon, who are going to be speaking, the leaders, we're told, for the first time in 34 years today. We're not sure which leaders, presidents or prime ministers, to discuss ending those Israeli strikes on Lebanon. We're going to be talking in the next hour to a former Israeli ambassador to the US about, why did the Israelis just randomly stop bombing Lebanon and killing civilians, which is basically the line we are hearing from most mainstream media. We're going to explain why that's not perhaps the most accurate version of events. What a surprise, everybody. Philip, I'm sure you'll have your top words given on that. But tell us what you think about this, in particular, these church gang rape suspects. Epsom protesters say, look, give us the descriptions. You want people to look for witnesses. You want to know what's, any more information. Well, tell us what we're looking for then.
Have the police learned nothing after the Southport riots? By withholding information, the vacuum that's there will be filled by all sorts of speculation. And you and I are speculating, and we, in our own minds, have a view as to who we think are probably behind
this. Here's the thing. Does anyone here think that if these alleged rapists, and again, we have to say alleged rapists,
Yes.
we don't know what's happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying we don't believe the woman, but she's an alleged victim at this current time. That's how the system works. That there have been false complaints about that. I'm not accusing her of that, but we need to maintain that basic principle of justice. If these were 3 or 4, say, white men, I'm pretty damn sure that when Surrey police gave out their description, it would have said.
100%.
We are searching for, and again, apparently, it happened at night. She left a nightclub. I think it's reasonable to assume that drink had been taken. Very unsure. I mean, a horrific, nighttime gang attack. Was it 2, 3, 4, 5? I mean, you wouldn't know. Understandable. But you might have, from a street lamp, grasped whether someone was light-skinned or dark-skinned, maybe at some point felt their hair, heard them speak. If these were white men speaking with a local accent, I'm pretty damn sure we'd know about it.
Oh, we would know about it. And the police aren't helping themselves. They're not helping themselves gather any evidence because, if someone has seen a gang of men walking around at a time before that in the vicinity or a time after that in the vicinity, then that will help track the potential movements of the alleged perpetrators.
Exactly. Well, Surrey Police have said it is still working to identify the identities of those suspected of carrying out the attack. A spokesman said at this early stage, we do not have full descriptions of any potential suspects. Note, full descriptions. Yeah. Well, we know there were men.
Yes.
Tall, short,
and we
fat.
know there's more than one.
We know there's more. We'll release further details once we have them. The victim is being supported by a specialist sexual offences liaison officer who's helping her through the process at her own pace. Now, a lot of people who, people who are victims of severe violent crimes and women of rape are incredibly traumatised and really struggle to give any details. But, I mean, we're looking at really basic stuff here. Oh. I suspect the situation is that these people are of non-white appearance, and there is a suspicion that they may perhaps not be British, and they are absolutely terrified. And of course, the reason they don't want to give this information out, and again, I don't know this, but I suspect, as we've seen since the Southport, that this seems to be the pattern. Despite them saying last August, the police, as a general rule, they would give us information. I suspect that again the same issue is that we can't tell people what we know so far or think we know so far because they'll probably all riot or go and attack an asylum hotel or something.
Well, and this is why the police turn up in riot gear whenever there's a peaceful protest out for asking the question. That just reinforces the what people are perceiving around this, and what the police don't seem to realise, and I don't think the government realises, is that actually there's a perfect storm brewing here. The more and more of these sorts of incidents that happen where there's a vacuum of information and people then automatically assume that it is asylum seekers that are coming in or some other group that's there. Combine that with the massive cost of living crisis that's hitting us with the cost of fuel crisis and everything else because of the wars that are going on elsewhere. We've got a perfect storm of things coming together that will blow up at some stage over the summer.
And it will. And again, I know the police will be looking at weather forecasts because the general rule, if it's warm and people are out and about, I mean, riots tend not to happen in the rain, interestingly, but we're more likely to have riots. But again, people are very angry. And again, these aren't the sort of yobs, like storming, Clapham Common, Clapham High Street, Waitroses. This is, these aren't youngsters. These are ordinary families just saying, hey, we are really worried. We thought we lived somewhere safe, and it turns out we don't live somewhere safe, and we want to know who we need to be wary of. And it's interesting, a lot of people pointing out, they didn't send the riot police out when they sent out, blokes with, bare arms, go, come on. Can you get out of the store, please? When we had hordes of, hundreds of teenagers ransacking stores in Clapham the other week. They don't send out the riot police when you've got a load of pro-Palestinian protesters every other week in London. They don't send out the riot police when you get, these pro-Iranian regime. I mean, literally people on our streets shouting Allahu Akbar outside Downing Street, as the Iranians are raining missiles down on our military bases. No riot police there, but a bunch of ordinary British people concerned about the safety of their daughters. No. Then the riot police need to come out. This is not policing by consent.
It's not, and the Chief Constable needs to be out and in the public domain and giving a little bit more detail behind what is going on, because this will blow up. Yeah,
absolutely.
You smell the coffee.
Yeah,
read the tea leaves.
And don't say we're going to give full information and then not give us full information and then basically, hint that we're all bad people. If it turns out it's a bunch of white British men,
then say it.
You'd say it, or black British men, or Asian British men, or anything, or a mixed group. I don't. Yeah. But let us know what we're looking for if people live in that area. What do you make of Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, promising action against sham lawyers abusing asylum system? They're not sham lawyers, they're actual sodding lawyers, a lot of these people. What the BBC has exposed this week, I mean, I'm being generous to them, but, basically these investigations they've done where it turns out that, I know, we're all shocked that charities and lawyers firms and everyone are basically charging thousands to migrants. These aren't the ones who are arriving off the boats. They don't need to do this because they just get granted asylum or leave to stay no matter what anyway. They know they've got a good chance of staying. But these are people, and it's interesting, it's largely Bangladeshis and Pakistanis who've got visas. Because that was absolutely the big Boris wave, wasn't it? Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria as well. But in particular, these two groups, Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, arriving here on a work visa or a tourist visa or a student visa, coming to this country, and then at the end or near the end of their visa, suddenly remembering that they're actually a victim of some sort of prejudice or abuse in their home country, and they can't go home. So these guys are basically providing for large sums of money. These people ain't poor if they're paying thousands of pounds for legal fees, and they are basically paying for documentation and proof and advice on how to say, I've had a gay relationship, I've been to gay clubs, gay pride. Apparently they're all joining the gay Tory groups. I mean, hilariously, and now the revelation today is that migrants making false domestic abuse claims to stay in the UK. We've already seen people making claims about being either atheist or Christian. I therefore can't go back to my country. And the Christian thing was even used by the Clapham acid attacker, who thankfully killed himself. Good riddance, I say, after he'd attacked a woman he'd been in a relationship with and her children in the street with alkaline, not acid, but similar effects. We all know this has been going on. Yeah. I was writing about this sort of stuff a couple of decades ago. I mean, but suddenly the Home Secretary discovered it. Yeah,
I've done investigations for other BBC outlets years ago about similar scams and doing things. But at the end of the day, it's great that Shabana Mahmood is bringing this out.
Is it?
Well, it is because it shows that she's actually sitting up and might start to take some action. Might is the big word here. She needs to take some action. These individuals are enabling taxpayers to be fraudulent or to be defrauded out of taxpayers' money. They are enabling the asylum seekers to commit crimes and stay here under false pretenses. The lawyers, the sham lawyers, should have their licenses removed. If they're dual passport holders, they should have their British passport removed. If they are just visa holders, they should have their visas revoked and be kicked out of the country with their professional qualifications nulled and voided.
Exactly. I mean, all us in prison. I'm sorry, but conspiring to
throw them out. Let's not pay for them to be in prison. Just get rid.
There is that, but again, that'll take ages. Well, they'll probably claim that they're gay and they can't be removed. I mean, that's the irony. They'll know how to do that. But this is the thing. We're told that the people who are doing all these asylum cases at the Home Office, they really know their stuff. They're very experienced. But look, so we're told that about when there are appeals and we have the asylum judges making the tribunals making the decisions. They're clearly getting a lot of this stuff wrong. They're clearly giving far too much benefit of the doubt. I mean, look, we see this even, in the DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, when, someone literally basically has the script which they've got from TikTok about what they have to say to get their disability allowance and basically to go for PIPs, their personal independence allowance, to basically never have to work and never be asked to go and look for a job again. I'm feeling anxious. Yes, I have had suicidal thoughts. Tick, tick, there you go. Have some money, you never have to work again. An awful lot of the people in our civil service really aren't very good judges of character. I mean, we would include, would we not, Keir Starmer, who wasn't a good judge of character about the man he appointed as our ambassador to the US.
Well, and he's not a good judge of character as the people he gets as our Attorney General, who gives them the legal advice that is this disabling legal advice. It is government policy to enable our civil servants and those that have to make judgments to come down on the fact of the side of those that are claiming and alleging that they've got this.
And that is the policy, isn't it?
That's policy. The government could turn around and say, no, we work on the principle of no is the answer and you have to try and prove it instead of yes is the answer.
But that wouldn't make us nice people.
It would make us much
sane people,
much saner, and would
no, but
stop
they want to be
ripping off
nice.
taxpayers'
They want
money.
to be. But again, this is it. The BBC, whose staff have thought that that I'm a racist bigot and a xenophobe for 25 years because I've been saying. I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't think that all the people claiming asylum are genuine. I know.
What?
But I know. But
don't say that out loud,
but again,
you get arrested.
when they say it. Well, it's this big revelation. I'm serious. None of these people have been reading the news and looking at any facts for me for the last 20 years. It's genuinely painful. Just want to get to a couple more stories. Today is the first anniversary of that Supreme Court ruling telling us what everyone already knew, which was what a woman is and what a man is, i.e. based on biological sex, and having a little piece of paper saying, I'm a man when I'm actually a woman, or I'm a woman when I'm a man, doesn't actually make you that actual sex. The anniversary of that. Now, I remember talking to some of those in court that day, celebrating it that day, and I'm like, I'm less optimistic than you are. We know, but actually, a huge number of local councils, hospitals, by the way, all by the way, under control of the government. Government departments are not actually obeying the law on single-sex basis. If it's a women's toilet, or it's a women's changing room, it's a women's prison, only women, and that means biological women, can be in that space. A year on, we're going to be talking to the founder of For Women Scotland, who actually, is the woman who's helped bring this case. But it is extraordinary we needed a court case to tell us what a woman was, because we are in scary times if anyone needs to be told that. But extraordinary that a year on, even government-controlled departments and organisations and funded by by our taxes are not obeying the law of the land.
It's ridiculous. And under the last government, Keir Starmer and his cronies would turn around and shout at anything that they thought the Tories were breaking the law over, yet they're just ignoring it completely. And it's yet another law that they're ignoring completely, another rule or anything else. And it's ridiculous. Where do we get a government that is going to actually obey the rules that they're bringing in themselves and backed by the High Court? But
we've got Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, who's also the Equality and Women's Minister. I mean, apparently she can't do both because she wanted the advice on this and the guidance to be, quote, watered down to be more inclusive. More inclusive. No, it includes women and girls.
Yes.
That's not being inclusive. It doesn't include people who aren't women and girls. I despair. I mean, genuinely, this party is an embarrassment. It really, really is. Just finally, got to talk about Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander. Her little Mini Cooper, God bless her, was taken out by a pothole so badly she actually had to get, basically, the car towed away. And she described it basically as a moon crater.
Yeah, but Labour have given so much money to the local councils to fix all the potholes and everything else. It's going on all of this inclusive-ness.
Yes, exactly.
And
if you can afford to spend any money at all on some rainbow-coloured paints to change your local crossings, but you ain't mending potholes, you've got a wrong spending priority.
Yes, very much so.
But central government has not been giving let's face it, the billions that councils need to do. And if you've got a choice between, for your statutory duty to ferry disabled children to school, or special needs kids, and feeding elderly people who need social care, and mending potholes, I'm afraid the councils are going to choose the first two.
Yes, but we've got an increasing number of council leaders who are earning more money than the Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
And I'm sorry, it's bizarre. There should be very clear guidelines as to who can get paid what for.
But they have to compete with the private sector, we're told, Philip.
Yeah. So does the Prime Minister.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then go off to the private sector and earn that money being that incompetent then. Yeah. Exactly, absolutely. And also, some councils manage it and some councils don't, which tell you it. Same with hospitals. Yeah. It is about management and leadership.
It's down to management leadership.
Absolutely.
100%.
So much more to talk about. So many more top guests to come. Can't wait to get to your calls already piling in. 0344 499 1000. Everything we've been talking about and much more. You get to have your say on what you want to talk about. Give us a call. Your call's up next. This is Talk. Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:25 is the time. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get back to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Chris is in, well, interestingly, Chris, you're in Epsom and you want to talk about this, well, extraordinary decision by the local police to send out the riot police. Basically, when there was a protest from local people saying, tell us some details, please, about the suspects you're searching for after a woman was gang raped in a churchyard.
Yeah, morning, Julia. Morning, Philip.
Morning.
We've spoken before many times, actually. Now, I want to explain something to you. That where you saw the protest going on is in dead centre of town. It's the crossroads in the centre of town.
Yeah.
The nightclub entrance that the girl was at, this poor girl, is about 20 feet
yep.
from that centre of town.
Yeah.
And from there and for a mile in every direction, including up to and past the church where she was attacked, we have high-definition CCTV. Right? And I mean high definition. It is a really, really good...
It's not that fuzzy stuff where, you can see someone's there, but nothing else,
No, we're talking this state-of-the-art.
Yeah.
And there is no way that the police don't have at least CCTV, even if they're balaclavaed, as you said earlier, Julia. They would have their clothing descriptions.
Yeah. And is there good street lighting as well?
Yes, it is. It's well lit.
And yet it's all a complete mystery. I have to say, though, I genuinely, having my experience of police forces, and I've had to report crime, and again, I'm not accusing, I know lots of coppers from friends, and I know how good a job they do, but I've been amazed by, 2 weeks on, have you asked for the CCTV? We're getting to that. Now, I'm hoping that, she was gang raped, this lady says, in the early hours of Saturday morning. I'm hoping that by, 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, the police had already gone and got the CCTV. That's my hope, in which case they'd had this information for quite a long time already.
Hang on, the police liaise with the council that run the CCTV system.
It's their CCTV, effectively.
Yes, basically. They would have... And they also interact with a shopping mall in Epsom as well, which also has high-def CCTV inside and outside the shopping mall. They're all coordinated to the police. They have a coordinator so that if the police are chasing someone, they if there's an active not an investigation,
they could kind of use the CCTV. So there's really no excuse for not knowing. What is the general view of the people who went on that protest? People just genuinely, I can't imagine people aren't talking about it because it's supposed to be somewhere. A lot of people have moved to Epsom to move out of London because they don't think it's safe enough for their daughters and themselves. So what is the general view? What is the general suspicion of people living in Epsom on this?
Well, you're absolutely right about people moving out. I'm a Fulham boy, born and bred. Yep. My family moved out to Epsom when I was 10 years old so that we would have a better education. It was a nicer place to live. There's lots of greenery around. We're within 40 minutes of either of the biggest airports.
Yeah. All right. You're working as a estate agent in Epsom now, Chris. No, but listen, that's the thing. People moved on. So what is the suspicion of people living there? What is it they think has actually happened and who's involved?
Well, I mean, there's lots of guessing going on. I'm not going to join in the guessing games. I know I think, but I don't really want to say. I think the police are obfuscating over...
You think the police know? You think the police know the suspects? Again, even if they were arrested, they'd still be suspects, not, criminals. But you think they know more than they're telling us. And is your suspicion that they're not telling us because actually these aren't white men? That's exactly right. And that's exactly the thought of everybody that was there yesterday. And there was everybody in my street that I've spoken to, which is a very quiet, very nice street. Yeah. And, I've said this before. My street, when my family bought this house 55 years ago, this street was completely white English. Now we have my friends. These are my friends. Next door is Portuguese. Across the road is Bangladeshi, Indian, Pakistani, Iraqi, and we're all friends. We all go to each other's barbecues. Yep. But, this is immigration that's worked. Yep. This mass immigration of people that we don't know where they've come from. Yep. We don't know what they've done. We don't know their past. Their culture is completely different. For instance, my Muslim friends across the road bought me across an Easter box of chocolates. And I took them something for Eid. Lovely. And again, integration, assimilation, no one has any issue with that. It's completely different from people. What Well, again, we don't know the nationalities, we don't know the immigration status or colour or anything else about the people who are being searched for by the police. Chris, really appreciate your call. Thank you so much. Really interesting information there as well. Let me go to Stuart quickly. He's in London. Stuart, you want to talk about Epsom? Interesting to know what Chris was saying about this high definition CCTV, good lighting. No reason why the police wouldn't already have quite a lot of information that they're not giving us right now.
Well, we can only guess why they're withholding information, can't we?
Yep.
What I find extraordinary is that within minutes they've got riot police there.
Yeah.
Where were they in Clapham the other day when there was hundreds of rampaging youths?
For the second night.
Down the streets,
For the second night as well. It wasn't like it was out of the blue and they couldn't have seen it coming.
Where are they every weekend in London when all this mob are screaming racist abuse and kill the Jews and whatever? Never to be seen. And I think another thing people got to do, when this keeps happening, attack by illegal immigrants, attacking people, if it's found out they are, they should sue the government, because it's the government's fault. Do you know what happened? Many years ago, we had a nightclub, and my boss had to call the police to keep people out. And they said to him, we don't mind you calling us all day long, I might use the word language they use, to keep garbage like this out your club. But when you let them in and there's trouble, you haven't done your job properly.
Yeah.
So what can we say about the government after Tories and Labour?
Very good point. If they weren't here in the first place, they wouldn't. Yeah, and again, but we still don't know. But that's because we're not being told. Stuart, I have to leave it there. 10:32 is the time. I'm going to go straight to a break. Up next, I'll be talking to chief political writer at Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Wonder what his thoughts are on this. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:34 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest, Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online. Very good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia. How's it going?
Where do we even start today, sir? Where do we even start? First of all, I just want to get your reaction, actually, to a couple of those calls about basically these church gang rape suspects, a woman raped, she claims, by a number of men. She doesn't even know how many, in the early hours of Saturday morning in a churchyard after leaving a nightclub in Epsom in Surrey. And the police have issued an appeal for help, information. But, great CCTV in the area, good lighting on the street. Apparently they have no information to give us, any description of these men. And then they happily send the riot police out to police a peaceful protest by local people saying, we would like to know some more information, please. What do you make of all of that?
I mean, I really agree with your last caller who just made that point that a lot of people will be thinking this morning, which is, why is it when there is a largely white working class protest about a rape, the riot police show up immediately, But when there was a gang of mostly non-white youths robbing shops and running riot in Clapham a couple of weeks ago, the cops just basically stood by and let it happen. We need answers on this. This is a really serious issue. The problem of two-tier policing, in my view, is undeniable now. It's partly an ethnic minority issue. It's partly because the police have been consumed by identity politics. It's partly because they are so suspicious of white working class communities. All of those things have combined to give rise to a police force that comes down harder on decent, ordinary people who want answers about a rape than they do on mobs screaming for the death of Jews or kids breaking up shops and so on. So we need answers on that. And I thought the letter that one of the protesters read out, just saying, listen, this is why we want a bit more information if possible. It was such a well-written, articulate letter. If you read the content of it, these are honest people by the looks of it who just want answers. They don't need to be criminalized in the way that we can see in those scenes.
Yeah, well, exactly. This was a man who was identified as Pete. He said, we came here today to deliver a letter to the police. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that, but they very kindly joined us. Let's read that letter out to them. And again, this was about being deeply concerned. This is about people worrying that there is a gang of rapists on the loose, and no one knows what to look out for. And women and girls are worried, and understandably, why wouldn't they be? It is extraordinary. And again, we don't know. These may just be maybe local men. We simply don't know. But why are they not telling us? And this is the lack of trust that we've got now. And what do you make also of? We were talking a bit earlier as well about Shemana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. She's promising tough action apparently against these sham lawyers who've been exposed, I use this in the loosest possible sense, by the BBC, who've finally woken up to what everyone else has been talking about for the last 25 years or so, about how there's sham lawyers, organisations who are basically raking in thousands of pounds by basically advising migrants. In this case, actually not boat migrants. These are people coming largely from Pakistan or Bangladesh on legal visas who've been apparently vetted, who miraculously at the end of their visa discover that actually they are victims of some sort of persecution back home and can't go back home, and they're being helped to the tune of thousands of pounds to get to make an asylum claim that's likely to get through. We've all known this is going on. When the Home Secretary says she wants to deal with it, I mean, I'm sorry, does anyone believe a word of this?
You know, as you say, we've known this for years. I mean, other media outlets have covered this for a long time. I'm glad the BBC has woken up to it, in fact, and maybe this represents a change in course. Maybe they're finally going to open their eyes to problems that ordinary Brits have been talking about for a couple of decades. That would be a good step forward. But yeah, we know about this. We know that so much of our immigration system is a scam. It's a bunch of bent lawyers and gullible judges and a political class that just looks the other way. All of that has contributed to a situation where, as we all know, there are people in the country who shouldn't be in the country, and they're being allowed to stay in the country by people who are teaching them how to lie, coaching them how to deceive the country in which they're moving to. I mean, what a starting point to arriving in a country where your whole presence is built on a lie, and built on a lie that you paid a handsome fee to acquire. I mean, such a sinister way to move to a country, and questions need to be asked about that. But it just speaks about the whole immigration system. It's completely broken.
Yeah.
We are such a pushover for so many people around the world.
It's actually embarrassing, isn't it? I would have thought, by definition, someone who's come here on a visa and been approved hasn't mentioned anything about any of their issues about being returning home, and then suddenly mentions it absolutely as an absolute matter of automatic fact. You get deported that day and you ain't never coming back. Full stop, nothing to discuss. And also, we need to do what Donald Trump has done. Just say there are certain countries, you know what, I know reformers threaten this, just very, very simple. You know, if you don't take your people back, if we get too many people, there's a high percentage who are basically claiming and, messing around with the system, we just won't take any of you. Because, you're going to have to sort this out. Your government's going to have to sort this out because the risk is too high.
To my mind, a lot of this is about signals. What signals is Britain sending to the world? Because the people who come here, they're not stupid. They're actually quite wise people who travel long distances to come to the UK for a particular purpose, whether it's to work or claim benefits or whatever else it might be. These are driven people who are picking up on signals. And the signals they're picking up on is that our borders count for nothing. We don't really police them. You can cross them willy-nilly pretty much every day of the week, hundreds of of people do. Our immigration system is a pushover. There are whole armies of bourgeois lawyers who will assist you to stay in the country forever. Yeah. Our political class has got no backbone whatsoever. Shabama Mahmood talks a good talk,
doesn't
but
she?
The government's not going to let her do anything, and she's not going to push anything through. So there are people around the world who look at Britain, and I don't even blame them for doing this. You know, they look at us and they say, "What a joke of a nation you've become. I'm going to try my hand, come to your country, get a house or a hotel room, make a bit of money, and maybe go home in 6 or 7 years' time." We've become a pushover. We might as well hang a sign on the White Cliffs of Dover saying, "Come here."
Yeah, absolutely. Come here. You can take the mick. I mean, that's the reality. So I'd use rather stronger language than that. But everyone's talking a good game. I mean, Kemi Badenoch, I think, has been very solid on certainly the issue of things like anti-Semitism from foreigners arriving in this country. And she said she would deport anti-Semitic foreigners. And we do have a very big issue. I mean, again, when we talk about rising anti-Semitism in this country, we've basically imported it from the third world. If you bring in a load of people from countries where anti-Semitism, Middle East, and Pakistan and Bangladesh, where anti-Semitism is the norm. It is a perfectly normal and acceptable viewpoint. It's as acceptable as, say, I don't know, at an Islington dinner party or at the BBC to be anti-Semitic. Don't be surprised when you get an attack on, a charity ambulance station. Don't be surprised when we had another attempted attack on a synagogue in North London, in Finchley, very near the Golders Green attack. No, 2 people have been arrested in relation to that. Other people have been arrested and charged in relation to the ambulance arson attack. But we've had, the attack on the synagogue in Manchester that left 2 people dead. This is a growing and very, very serious and sinister issue. Simply saying we'll deport these people, shouldn't we just not be letting them in the first place?
Yeah, you shouldn't. We shouldn't be letting in so many people from cultures and nations that we know have anti-Semitic tendencies and which are also misogynistic and homophobic and a bit backward. I know you're not allowed to say that.
No,
anymore.
we are. No. These are medieval cultures. Yeah. Large parts of Pakistan or Bangladesh live under the same basic medieval culture and law. That's the reality.
Yeah, and the problem is if you then allow a lot of those people into the country at the same time as this country refuses to say what its values are, refuses to enforce its cultural norms, you're creating a tinderbox of violence and racism and tension. That's what we've given rise to with a system that we've had. But, the anti-Semitism crisis is spinning out of control. And I'm really worried that the firebombing of the Finchley synagogue will just be brushed aside because it wasn't a so-called successful attack. The bombs didn't go off. There was no significant damage, but we can't let it slide. This was another attempt to terrorize the Jews of this country and to say to them, you are not even safe in your place of worship. Yeah. The fact that more politicians and people in the media aren't taking this seriously is really shocking.
No, again, they talk the talk, but they don't actually do anything about it. They go, well, what we don't want is a load of Islamophobia as a result. No. No one is firebombing mosques. They're not. I'm sorry. There are some horrible, nasty, racist, genuinely far-right people who are a threat. I get that. But we're not talking on the same scale. And even when we talk about anti-Muslim attacks compared with anti-Jewish attacks, in terms of per capita, the number of people in the population who are of those religions, it is off the scale what is happening in Jewish communities, and totally and utterly unacceptable. And I would say a lot of times fueled by an awful lot of what we see in the media and what is, if you talk about Israel being baby killers enough in the media, people will start thinking it's justifiable to carry out acts of hate. And that is what is happening. Just finally, and very briefly, I want to ask you about something, and you've been such an amazing campaigner on this issue, on basically protecting women's rights and safe spaces from the claims that men who believe or pretend to believe that they are women from entering those spaces. The Supreme Court ruling was a year ago today. We're going to be talking to one of the founders of For Women Scotland who brought that case, where extraordinarily in this country we needed to have judges at the Supreme Court tell us what a woman was, even though I think your average 2-year-old could tell you. But even a year on, huge number of government departments, local councils, local schools, run, all funded by the government, NHS trusts and others, are simply not obeying the law and are still allowing men who identify as if they are women to enter women's safe spaces, even to, for instance, watch a female nurse get down to her bra and knickers when she's changing into her nurse's uniform. I mean, why on earth do you think this is happening? Why is Labour betraying women right now?
Because they're such moral cowards, and they're still scared of those small but noisy and influential woke people and trans activists who will call them bigots and scum if they dare to do the right thing.
Are they scared of them, or do they actually, does Bridget Phillipson, the Women's and Equalities Minister, does she actually believe that, you know, like Keir Starmer, that a man who says he's a woman is actually a woman?
Well, that's the question. They either believe it, which makes them idiots, complete lunatics, or they don't believe it and they're going along with it anyway, which makes them cowards. I mean, what a choice between those two things. But the bottom line is this, you know, this issue more than any proves how mad our country went. When we had a Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who a couple of years ago said some women have got a penis, Zach Polanski and Ed Davey still say the same thing. We've got all these public bodies letting men into women's bathrooms, that place where women are supposed to be able to tend to themselves, change their outfits, get into their work gear with some privacy and dignity. And that has been sacrificed at the altar of the feelings of a handful of men in dresses. It's disgraceful.
Hear to that. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online, thank you very much. Philip Ingram, I'll let you come back on any of the topics you wish to there.
Well, I like the phrase that Brendan came out with when he accused the government of being moral cowards. And, you know, they're moral, if you look at, you know, their record, moral cowards with regard to women's rights, moral cowards with regard to dealing with asylum seekers in a robust way, and you know, enabling the police to be moral cowards, not giving us the truth behind what's going on from a criminal. Moral cowards behind funding defence. Moral cowards about green madness. Moral cowards about taking freebies yet criticising the previous government. Moral cowards about misleading the public and everything that's going on. You know, I think that phrase is something that we need to use much more.
I would say they're also moral cowards on the issue of the Iran conflict, and certainly on the issue of Gaza and Hamas. Oh yeah, and Hezbollah in Lebanon as well. Well, up next, going to take a quick break. I'm going to be talking to the former Israeli ambassador to Washington DC. That's Michael Oren, about what is actually going on in Lebanon. As we are told, we are going to see the leaders of Lebanon and Israel meeting for the first time in some 34 years. This is Talk.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:49 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Time to say Philip Ingram joins me still in the studio. We'll get his thoughts what my next guest has to say. He is Michael Oren. He's a former Israeli ambassador to the United States and is here to join us on the day that we are told by Donald Trump, anyway, that the leaders of Israel and Lebanon will be meeting for the very first time in 34 years to discuss some sort of, well, de-escalation at the minimum of the hostilities between the two countries. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Julia.
My first question to you, Michael, I'm going to do it in the manner of a BBC or Sky News interviewer, because to give you an idea of what we're dealing with in this country. Michael Oren, as a former Israeli ambassador to the US, why on earth did Israel, out of the blue, decide to start bombing babies in Lebanon?
But that's actually a softball question for the BBC. A more BBC-like question would be, how many innocent Lebanese children and babies do you have to kill in order to feel, you've killed enough?
That's kind of closer. But that's where
BBC question I get.
That is where we're at. So no, you know the point I'm making.
To sharpen your BBC skills there, Julia. Yes. I don't know. Here, what does Israel do? Listen, what you're not reading about or hearing about from the BBC or Sky News, or for that matter, for the New York Times and other austere August publications, is any mention of the 6,000 plus rockets that Hezbollah has fired at the northern part of Israel, which had rendered a large swath of this country, a part of it which I think is dear to many people around the world, the Galilee, has rendered it uninhabitable.
Yeah.
And that the situation in the north is not a security issue for the state of Israel, it is an existential issue for the state of Israel. And that means that if we lose the north, our enemies will internalize that this is how you basically kick the Israelis out of their country. Hezbollah the other night fired a rocket from northern Lebanon that hit our southern port of Ashdod. Actually went over my house here in South Tel Aviv. So it's not just the north that is in danger, it's the entire country. And so the stakes here are enormously, enormously high for the state of Israel.
And indeed, Hezbollah as a terrorist force, and these attacks are on Hezbollah, not on the Lebanese people. Hezbollah makes sort of Hamas look like a vicar's tea party, to be honest with you, in terms of their numbers, in terms of their ferocity, and in terms of their the extraordinary firepower they have. And this is the key thing, because we see reports again and again, a lot of hand-wringing. And look, no one wants a single civilian, let alone a child, to die during a war. But sadly, that is the reality of not just this war, not what happened in Gaza, but in Iran, but every single war ever through the history of time. But the point is that Hezbollah has embedded itself across Lebanon, particularly in the south, but also in Beirut as well, basically in civilian areas, in indeed civilian homes, hasn't it?
Of course, and the the Lebanese health ministry, much like the Gaza health ministry under the control of Hamas, does not distinguish between the number of combatants killed and the number of civilians killed. And while every civilian loss, as you're right, is a tragedy, Israel has very, very high level and accurate information on the number of Hezbollah terrorists we have killed. We have killed something in the order of 1,500 Hezbollah terrorists. And if you factor that in, even to the Lebanese numbers, you're going to get even less, a ratio of 1-to-1 civilian to combatant fatalities, which is a record that's not been equaled by any army in history, including the British Army during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So, you're not going to get credit for that. They will not.
Well, we had the same thing in Gaza, didn't we? Lots of people are still saying, and they're justifying, as we were just discussing, Brendan O'Neill, still justifying, terror attacks on Jews in Britain on the basis that, well, Jews / Israelis, Zionists, they kind of sometimes forget, to be honest, about who they're talking about, love killing babies, deliberately target civilians. When we know in Gaza, I mean, on Hamas's own statistics, actually, it appears something like 80% of the people killed were actually terrorist fighters for Hamas. I mean, extraordinary ratio. And we know that Israel does actually give warnings. But in terms of the needs of this war to continue, we were told, well, certainly it would appear that the Iranians were under the impression that the ceasefire deal with the United States also included Israel's as a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Israel have made it very clear that's not the case. It does sound like Netanyahu or Herzog, the Israeli president, is going to be dragged by Trump to have some sort of talks with the Lebanese leaders. Is there any likelihood of a ceasefire before, unless or until Hezbollah is completely ousted from Lebanon?
Well, that's a question that many Israelis are asking themselves right today. And the answer to that is, how should we say, in Washington terms, it's what we used to call granular. All right. Why is it granular? Because it's complicated. Why is it complicated? Israel is heavily dependent on the Trump administration. We have a close alliance, but also, the ability of the Israeli government to say to Donald Trump no is very circumscribed. And nobody knows this better than Benjamin Netanyahu. And while on one hand, we have this existential situation in the northern part of the country, the Trump administration is facing very severe and escalating opposition to the war in the United States, even within his own party, even within his own White House, economic issues like rising gas prices, cost of living, fertilizer shortages. I mean, all these different issues, pressure from allies around the world, including the British government. And so Trump says we have to take that, we have to factor that into our decision making. So how do you find, a golden mean between an existential threat and the need to maintain a very close alliance with our ultimate ally, the United States? Not so easy. So how is this being done? One is the possibility that, as President Trump told Netanyahu the other night, scale down your attacks in Lebanon. So Israel, for now over a week, has not been bombing in Hezbollah headquarters and other assets in Beirut. We've been restricting our anti-Hezbollah activities to South Lebanon,
where civilians have been warned for many months now to leave their homes.
Civilians are gone. They're pretty much gone. They've fled north of the Litani River. It's about 10 miles from our border. So that's one way. The other way is get into a peace negotiations with Lebanon so that the prime minister can say to the people of Israel, yes, I'm making a huge sacrifice, I'm making a painful sacrifice in the north, but look what we're getting. We may get peace with this important Arab country, our neighbor, the Lebanese. Mm-hmm. So we had an opening, sort of mostly festive opening of talks between our ambassador in Washington and Lebanon's ambassador in Washington. Now there is scheduled to be a telephone call, not a meeting, between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Mr. Aoun in Lebanon, which is something. It has certainly a symbolic value. I'm sure the Iranians don't like it. Hezbollah has come out to condemn it. And I must say the Lebanese government is making a very courageous move here because it risks reigniting a civil war in Lebanon.
Well, this is the issue, isn't it? For those of us who not sitting, having to live with this and having family members moving because of bombing, is that Hezbollah is a terrorist organisation that's embedded within Lebanon. It's a terrorist organisation that is a drug mafia, people trafficking, child sex trafficking. This is a nasty organisation, massively funded by the Iranian regime. But they've got an army and their Hezbollah fighters that is, twice the size of the Lebanese army? So the battle with Israel isn't really with the Lebanese government as much as with the terrorist organisation that's taken over that country.
Hezbollah is widely recognized as the strongest non-state military organization, not just in the Middle East, but in the world. And the Lebanese army cannot in any way take on Hezbollah. Yeah. The Lebanese know this. We know this. The Americans know this. So that begs the question, okay, you can make a peace agreement, even a pro forma one on paper, but what does it mean? Does that mean Israel's going to stop firing at the people of Galilee? And the answer to that right now is no. And the only way this is going to happen, Israelis don't necessarily like hearing this, what I'm about to tell you now. I say this on Israeli news. It's an unpopular position, but it happens to be the truth, unfortunately, is that there's really ultimately no military solution to the Hezbollah threat. And we'd have to basically conquer all of Lebanon. I was involved as a young soldier in the last time we tried to do that in 1982. So now you know how old I am. It didn't work out so well. And even then, it's not going to stop. The only way truly to vanquish Hezbollah is by drying up its source of funding and arms, and that is Iran.
Yeah, and that is the absolute reality, isn't it? That a lot of people simply don't face. And also the simple fact we're told, well, civilians are dying in Lebanon. Not as many civilians are dying in Israel. So somehow that must mean that Israel is uniquely evil, as opposed to, well, actually, no, the Israeli government protects its civilians, as opposed to putting them in harm's way, as Hamas and Hezbollah deliberately try and do, and then somehow are blamed for that. Michael Oren, I so appreciate you joining us. I wish we could talk for more time, but a former Israeli ambassador to the US, just giving us a little bit of perhaps more insight than you're getting from the so-called foreign correspondent experts you see on the BBC and other news outlets. Michael Oren, thank you. Philip Ingram, quick response from you.
There's one bit that isn't discussed out there, in that Israel's got a legal basis for attacking Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. That's United Nations Security Council 1701, signed in 2006, called for Hezbollah to be disbanded as part of that resolution. It hasn't happened.
I don't know how long we would put up with having rockets from a terrorist organisation or our neighbouring country, and we would just go, oh, absolutely fine, we won't respond and protect our own people. No other country in the world would be expected to do that. Oh, unless it's Israel. So much more to talk about in the next hour. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, thank you so much for joining us. If you just tuned in, you've missed a rip-roaring first hour. No, not just me, but top guests and also top calls as well on lots of the big stories of the day. And don't forget, if you have missed anything, you can go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be discussing those protesters out in Epsom in Surrey yesterday, demanding that police release proper descriptions and CCTV footage of the men suspected of gang raping a 20-year-old woman outside a church in Surrey in the early hours of Saturday morning. Fascinating caller on that a little bit earlier, Chris, who lives in Epsom, pointing out they've got high-definition CCTV cameras and good lighting along the high street where this woman would have walked from a nightclub to the churchyard where it's alleged that she was gang raped, and yet police apparently don't have any information. Even though they've asked people to help look for these assailants. I'm not quite sure how people can do that if they don't know what these people look like or anything else about them. Plus, we're going to discuss the migrants who are falsely claiming to be victims of domestic abuse to stay in the country, according to a BBC investigation. This is all part of their investigation into those dodgy law firms and dodgy charities who are basically charging thousands of pounds to migrants who already arrived here on visas, largely from Pakistan and Bangladesh, to basically stay here and game the system by claiming to be either gay or victims of domestic abuse, or frankly anything and everything, rather than go home. Plus, we're going to be talking about Rachel Reeves is raising taxes at the fastest pace in the world. Who's saying that? Not the Tories or Reform or Lib Dems or Greens. The International Monetary Fund are the ones who are saying that. Plenty more besides to come up, lots more to talk about. Delighted to say that still with me, mainly because I locked the studio door and he can't get out, Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. He joins us every Thursday. Morning to you again.
Morning again.
I mean, it is very interesting. We've got loads going on in the international scene. We were just talking to the former Israeli ambassador to the US, Michael Oren, about what's going on in Lebanon. And a lot of the news is about those truths. But a lot of the news about that is also about the economic impact on us here in Britain as well, and that is certainly a major concern for people. But I've got to be honest with you, I mean, we talk about that a lot. A lot of people getting in touch, a lot of people very concerned about crime that is coming to our country as a result of people who've come to our country either illegally or trying to stay here by using dodgy means, but also people we have no idea whether they are British or foreign or dual nationality or anything else about them, including this case in Epsom in Surrey. A woman 20 years old, in her 20s, leaves a nightclub around the 2 o'clock mark called Labyrinth in Epsom, walks down the high street. Now, I think we can probably assume early hours of the morning, leaving a nightclub on a weekend, drink has probably been taken. So fuzzy memories, we don't know, but she says that she was gang raped by a number of men, doesn't even know how many men. Went to the police. Surrey police say they're still working to identify the identities of those suspected of having carried out the attack, even though, extraordinarily, they did put out an appeal earlier this week to ask for people to get in touch with any information, CCTV and the like. But surely they must have a vague idea. Have they asked this woman the most basic things? Do you know how many men? Black, white, tall, short? Did they speak English accents? Were they speaking a foreign language? Did they have beards, bald? I mean, the most basic stuff where even in a moment of absolute abject terror, a woman might be able to give some information. Because this isn't just about catching the perpetrators of this crime. It's about preventing future crimes by these people. And no wonder ordinary, law-abiding, good citizens of Epsom were on the streets last night wanting to deliver a letter to the police station to basically say, we want information. Give us the information that you must have. Chris, our caller earlier, pointing out that he lives in Epsom. They've got really good CCTV. They've also got good street lighting all along that area where, unless she's randomly, being taken 20-mile detour, there must be information the police have. The police didn't accept the letter, but they did surround these protesters with riot police. And a lot of people are asking why we get two-tier policing when a bunch of rampaging teenagers, even on their second night in Clapham, don't have riot police, just some guys with their sleeves rolled up going, yeah, can you get out of the marks and sparks and stop smashing things up and stealing, please? Why we don't see riot police with the pro-Palestinian marchers and people shouting Allahu Akbar in support of the Iranian terror regime while they are bombing our RAF bases outside Downing Street. No riot police then, but there are riot police when ordinary law-abiding people are saying, can you give us some information about men who have allegedly raped a woman in our local town?
Brendan O'Neill, who was talking to us earlier, was quite right when he said this is a perfect example of two-tier policing. We're getting normal people being put into a position where peaceful protest is being dealt with harshly. And it's right and proper that people should protest about large groups of undocumented males of fighting age coming into their particular areas. And at the same time, whenever there are crimes that are committed, the detail doesn't come out either to turn around and say that these large groups of undocumented males were not part of this, they're not suspects, or they were. Look at Epsom.
We have no idea. But we know what we all suspect, which is that if the police believe these suspects to be white British men, they would have told us that by now, and they haven't.
But again, let's take it back one step further. If you've got a large group of men that are operating in a town centre like that, they're going to be moving around. They don't just appear out of a Doctor Who's TARDIS. We don't know, large group.
Could be 3 or 4. We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, but they don't just appear out of Doctor Who's TARDIS. So they will have moved and congregated. Epsom Town Centre has got, as Chris Poole turned around and said to us, a number of high-quality CCTV cameras. I understand it's got at least 15 high-quality public space CCTV cameras that are recording high-definition photographs. The police will have an idea of who these people are. And where are the days of the old photo fit picture that you got out? This is
that's what I think we were all expecting. When the police launched an appeal, everyone went, "Oh, okay. So what are we looking for? Who are we looking for? Have you seen this man? Well, give me a picture at least." So they haven't said they were wearing balaclavas. They haven't said they were masked. They haven't, and even then, you might have an idea. There's nothing at all. And again, even if the alleged victim, and we must say that, we don't know, even if she can't remember. Again, so she's dragged into a churchyard. You must have CCTV footage of that moment, and you can go from this moment. Where were they earlier? And when they passed by a street light or under a shop that has very good CCTV at ground level, you could then piece it together. I would have thought that a gang rape of a woman in her 20s was absolutely the sort of crime the police might bother to look into. They don't look at shoplifting or bike thefts or whatever thefts, but you'd like to think that they're saving their time for gang rapes.
Well, you'd think they'd take this seriously, and that you'd think they'd learn from the Southport riots and get the information out into the public domain as quickly as possible. And if that information was from that group of people, then they can prepare whatever they need to for potential action that might happen. Now, again,
there are a lot of people who will be saying,
that's assumptions.
This is we're all making lots of assumptions, and a lot of people saying, even people saying, well, we suspect it may be foreigners, migrants, that is racist and it's no, people are just playing the odds. There are certain crimes. If take Sweden, for instance. Sweden, and certainly the capital, virtually no reported rapes that were not saying this is okay, but domestic rapes, also a horrific crime. But in terms of someone being dragged into a park and raped, that was pretty much unheard of in Stockholm's crime statistics for decades. After mass immigration, Sweden, made some huge mistakes. The rate at which we are seeing serious sexual attacks, and in particular gang rapes, is off the scale. And when these people when the details emerge and when they are convicted, almost entirely they are foreign males, and they're not from France or Denmark. they're from Middle Eastern or other countries where North African, Indian subcontinent, they're from countries where there is a very different attitude to women and women's safety and women's rights and dignity and the like. And it is not a coincidence that people say, again, when you see day after day after day, you're seeing convictions of people who turn out to be either a failed asylum seeker or someone who's come to this country, as a migrant, who are committing these crimes. Now, we have plenty of our own rapists, we have plenty of our own thieves, plenty of our own murderers. We don't need to import any more, thank you very much. And that's the point. We're already stuck with enough wrong-uns anyway. But it is crazy for us to be importing more. And we are playing some really bad odds for our women and children in this country when we import men from countries where of course, if a woman isn't covered up, she deserves to be raped. Why wouldn't you rape one of those women? She's just a whore anyway. And I'm sorry, if you've not travelled much, you may not realise, but that is a very common attitude in huge swathes of the world.
And these people are coming from those countries, and we know that their criminal gangs being infiltrated into the asylum seekers that are coming across. We know that they're terrorists being infiltrated into. That doesn't mean that's the majority. But, free bit of comms training for
too many.
Free bit of comms training for Epsom police. If you leave a vacuum in the information domain, other people are going to fill it, and if they fill it with stuff that's wrong, that's because you've left the vacuum.
I don't believe they don't know any information at all about these people.
They know.
And if they do know, and they're not telling us, I want people to be sacked. Because they're lying. Because they put out a statement saying at this early stage, we do not have full descriptions of any potential suspects.
Well, full descriptions.
Full. Again, we have a description, don't we?
Yeah.
Tall, short, fat, bearded. Give me something.
But that's not a full description. That's not giving your eye colour, your hair colour.
No, exactly. We don't know whether he's got a mole on his right cheek.
Exactly.
Come on. No, we know we're not stupid. We know when we're being lied
but again, this is wordsmithing, and we're saying wordsmithing from our Prime Minister the whole way down, and this is where it's from the top. And
but they're so much cleverer than us.
I get really angry at this because they're misleading the general public that's out there,
they're misleading
and they think
us.
They can do it.
They're misleading us because A, they think we're stupid, and B, they think we're nasty, horrible, violent bigots, and we are simply one wrong bit of information away from rioting. This is simply not true. Even if you go back to the convictions of Southport riots, leaving aside, some, high-profile cases, like Lucy Connolly, which I don't believe should have ever gone to trial, and certainly shouldn't have led to people spending a year behind bars. But in terms of the people actually committing violence, throwing bricks, attacking, outside a synagogue, a mosque, attacking, asylum seekers' hotel and things. I think almost to a man, the people who were convicted already had a string of offences. They were already wrong-uns. They already had a string of violent offences, theft, drugs, you name it. They were already wrong-uns. Ordinary, law-abiding British people don't go around throwing bricks, attacking people because they have got different colour skin from them, or because of different religion from us, or new arrivals.
Unless you're from Northern Ireland.
Yes, okay, fair enough. He's allowed to say that, I can't. But they really, really don't. That's not what British people do. They just want to know that they and their family members and their neighbours are safe. And when they know that they're not, and they know the police are lying to them, which the police are doing so now, feel free to sue, please. I think you're lying to us. I've got good reasons. It's my honestly held opinion that they are doing so. Then I'm sorry. They have a right to be speaking out. And sending the riot police out, frankly, is an absolute sodding insult. It really, really is. And as was pointed out, a man referred to as Pete, he addressed the officers with a microphone last night. We got some of that footage of that we've been playing, saying, we came here today to deliver a letter to the police. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that, but they very kindly joined us. Great lad. Let's read that letter out to them. And basically said, I'm writing as a deeply concerned resident of Epsom to formally request clarity and assurance following reports of a serious and distressing incident that is said to have taken place locally. It's been widely discussed within the community that a 20-year-old woman was subjected to prolonged and violent assault, reportedly occurring in a churchyard and occurring for a significant period of time. What is compounding this concern is the apparent lack of publicly available information regarding the incident. There's been no clear communication about whether suspects have been identified, apprehended, or whether there is any longer a risk risk to the public. The absence of detail has led to widespread speculation, misinformation and growing unease within the community. We fully appreciate the need for discretion during active investigations. However, we believe it's essential that the public is provided with appropriate updates and reassurances, particularly when an incident of this severity has occurred. At present, many women and girls in Epsom feel uncertain about their safety. Well, he sounds like a wrong 'un, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he sounds like someone who's going to put a brick through someone's window.
It has to be done for in incentivising riots and
if only any of our MPs could speak all right so eloquently and so reasonably. All fair play to you, mate. This comes, by the way, of course, and we say the two-tier policing because we don't see this as the pro-Palestinians marches and the like. Well, you don't want to rile them up because you know what will happen then. Yeah, we do. Yeah, exactly. But we've also got the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood promising action against what she calls sham lawyers abusing the asylum system. This is BBC investigation. The BBC's woken up after 25 years. Turns out there are people trying to gain the asylum system. Oh, no, I'm as surprised as you are, and as surprised as the Home Secretary apparently is, saying they're going to take action. Well, they're not sham lawyers. These are real lawyers, and lots of charities, other organisations, and the BBC has couched this very much as these aren't boat people. These are people who've arrived here being vetted. Largely from Pakistan and Bangladesh. You don't need asylum from those countries. You really don't. Especially if you're a man, you really don't. And they are coming to this country legally and then going, oh, I've just suddenly remembered. I can't possibly go back, I'll be persecuted. They're claiming to be gay, given documentation and proof and letters from a past lover, etc., why they can't go back. They are pretending they've been victims of domestic abuse. We've also had the cases where they say, well, I'm Christian, I'll be persecuted, or I'm an atheist, I'll be persecuted. Extraordinary, apparently people are falling for this, but the BBC even couches this very much. These people are being charged thousands of pounds. They don't have to pay it. Mm-hmm. They are paying people to commit a criminal crime which they're involved in. I mean, of course all of these people should be criminally charged and booted out of the country where possible, but why has the Home Office just woken up to this?
Well, as you say, it's been going on for years, and the Home Office doesn't just need to wake up to this, it needs to take very rapid action. And these groups that are doing it, the groups of lawyers, the companies that are doing it, the lawyers need to be struck off, the individuals need to be identified what their nationality is. Yep. If they're here on a visa, then the visa should be revoked. If they've got dual citizenship, then their British citizenship should be revoked, and they'd be thrown out of the country. Yep. We have to crack down very, very hard and very quickly on this, otherwise it'll just continue.
And you were saying earlier on the show, when it comes to a Home Office and tribunals and things on, whether it's asylum or whatever reason, the default should be no.
Correct. Yeah, we negotiate from no, and we negotiate from your flight is booked tomorrow.
Yeah, so unless you've got very, very good proof that you are a victim. And I'm sorry, everyone and the victims of human trafficking, domestic slavery. I mean, people are going to claim anything.
The trouble is the genuine people who fall into that bracket are being swamped by all of those that are spamming the system, and therefore a lot of the genuine people are not getting treated with the way that we should be treating them.
Exactly. But in the effort to be nice.
We should be nasty.
Well, yeah. The priority should be the British people.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about what is going on in Iran, because actually one of the big fears, if you look, extrapolate worldwide, if we do continue with this Iran conflict, if we do continue with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, not just oil, gas, jet fuel, fertilizer, helium, pretty much everything we rely on in the modern world, not getting out of the Strait of Hormuz, not only prices rising, but actually fears of mass starvation and disruption in many third world countries that rely on a lot of those supplies. If that does continue, we're looking at, again, huge numbers of people trying to move to the West to try and get somewhere where they can survive. That's a realistic concern. Now, you were sort of shrugging at that. You think that's not likely? Because that's one of the long-term problems, is it not?
It is to a degree. I don't think we're going to see large numbers moving out of Iran.
I don't mean Iran.
I think the numbers that are coming out of Africa, the biggest hit on them was the potential impact from grain and oil coming out of Ukraine, and therefore a lot of these other commodities will hit countries that can take the shock a little bit more. The fertilizer will hit the United States. It will hit China in a very big way. It'll hit India, Pakistan, and therefore there are issues there. But we're already seeing flows from those countries. I don't think they're going to increase dramatically because of this.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. We're also told that we are going to be facing, possible shortages here. We've already had, warns about jet fuel shortages, and it's been pointed out again and again that we haven't really seen the impact other than price rises, certainly not shortages yet, simply because all of the tankers that had all those things on already, the ones the goods we're using now, whether it's the liquefied natural gas, or whether it's the fertilizer, that was already on its way out, and it takes weeks and weeks to get here. So we're still living off those supplies. But with 2 months of closure of the Straits, and who knows what's going to happen. And the latest IMF predictions based on what's going to happen to our economy, they're based on basically the war being over and the Straits of Hormuz being open again in a few weeks, as opposed to who knows? Is it going to go on for months on end? Who knows what's going to happen? No one literally knows. I imagine even the Iranian mullahs as well. Then you're looking at completely different territory in terms of shortages of stuff, shortages of fuel. We have probably the least gas storage supplies in the world. We are not a net exporter like some of our allies, like America and Canada and Norway. And we are going to be in a very, very bad state.
Well, and this is one thing where I'm going to come down in support of the government, because by putting out these statements and saying, look, we need to be prepared for this, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but you have to prepare the people for the potential for it to happen. And the more time you have in preparation, the more warning that you can give, then it allows people to adjust their lifestyle, make sure that you've got your freezer stocked, make sure you've got everything else going. That preparation. The last thing you want is this cold hard shock. Oh, from tomorrow you're not going to get. So this is preparation, this is planning, this is resilience planning.
But no, but the government should be planning. They knew that there was some action was going to happen, and we've got 2 months max of gas storage, and we've apparently only had 3 days worth of gas storage. France and Germany have got 3 months. No, they've got 6 months worth or something, and those are actually full.
Yeah, and then they can dip into wider EU storage facilities.
But the government knew. Don't tell us not to stockpile fuel. I mean, that's a dangerous thing to do, by the way. Don't say, well, this might happen, but then not actually do the preparations you're supposed to do. Well, with running the country and all.
Well, and those preparations go up to further into the national resilience side of things. So, as you say, it's oil and gas storage, it's national resilience in food storage, it's national resilience in these critical minerals, fertilizers and everything else storage. It's national resilience in making sure that we've got the ability to defend ourselves in case something goes on. And we're hearing, we see what's happening with all the defence budget. You've debated that over the last few days, and everything else. The government is not taking things at that national level. It is. And this is one case, and it's the only case so far, of warning us at an individual level that this could be coming. Doesn't mean to say it's going to.
No, but no one knows what it is. But I thought the point of government was they were supposed to plan for these things. That's kind of their job. Don't worry, though, Keir Starmer's calling in social media tech firm leaders to sort of wag his finger at them again, because if in doubt, it's ID cards, digital ID cards, or it's having a go at social media firms and talking about safety. These are the two things that this government thinks they can actually do to solve anything, which kills me. Just want to talk to you about one other story, because I try not to do this too often. I really don't. Harry and Meghan are on. They're not on a tour. They're nobodies. They're not official royals. They're just going on a private visit to Australia, and then it's all over the media. But what a surprise. I think Harry was worried that her being on MasterChef Australia wasn't a big enough news story, so he's decided to do an interview in which he said, apparently in highly emotional and highly personal comments on day 3 of their Australian tour, speaking at a, by the way, $1,000 a head summit in Melbourne Park. He said he'd felt lost, betrayed or completely powerless during his life. He'd had his head in his sand for years until he quit his role as a working royal, and he declared that he never wanted to be a working royal because it killed his mum. And also, this is as Meghan says, that she was bullied online for a decade, every day for 10 years, and became the most trolled person in the world. So just going to get my little violin out. Now, I've got a lot of sympathy for Harry. One of the reasons I'm not a fan of the monarchy as an institution. I think it's very unfair, particularly if you're born into it. You don't have a choice. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, is what I've always said. And as a little boy who had, a father who probably didn't know how to father because he wasn't parented in a loving way himself by parents of a certain generation. But I'm sorry, that was quite normal for men of his age, but nevertheless. And losing his mother at a young age, and then still being in the public eye, scrutiny, I think it must have been horrific. Don't think Meghan's the solution. I'd love it if they lived a private life, but they choose not to. But this Meghan, I was bullied, I was told, you were criticised for a lot of things that you deserve to be criticised for. You went online, you wanted to be a public figure, and you got a load of stuff back. I mean, sweetheart, if she had a look at my timeline on social media, she'd last 5 minutes.
Why are we talking about them?
Oh, okay.
Harry has contributed to this country. He's served in the armed forces. He's served in war. Meghan is an American Hollywood actress wannabe. But if you put everything that she's doing into context from the American perspective, it's all about self-promotion, because that's how you make your money and all the rest of it. So she's doing what we'd expect her to do. Yeah. Who cares? Let them crack on, and let's stop talking about
I've been told. Anyway, give us a call, 0344 499 1000 to have your say on anything. I'm not taking calls on Meghan and Harry. I'm not. I refuse. I will. We have standards on this station. The Home Secretary has vowed to take. We're starting them today, Philip. Cheeky sod.
I haven't had the memo.
Starting them at 11:27. The Home Secretary has vowed to take action against sham lawyers who help bogus asylum seekers stay in Britain by falsely claiming to be gay or domestic abuse victims or anything and everything else. What's your reaction to that? And also, what is your reaction in terms of that alleged gang rape in Epsom? Why do you think the police are not getting this information, which they must surely have by now, of who the suspected perpetrators are, and surrounding locals who are genuinely concerned about the safety for women and girls in that town, surrounding them with riot police last night? I want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate, and text costs one standard network rate message. We'll get to those messages up next. This is Talk.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:30 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls before we go to our next guest. Let's talk to Simon, who's in Derby. Simon, you want to talk about the migration and the BBC expose 2 days running.
Yeah, good morning, Julia.
Morning.
I'm just coming back to you on your subject or the topic that we're discussing regarding the coaching immigrants.
Yeah.
Which, I like to think, and I'm sure you do, I'm pretty sure I'm right, that most UK folk are very kind and obliging and welcoming.
Yes.
And do we really want people in our country who are trying to sneak in through some false sort of idea that they are not quite what they say they are? Do we really want that some deceptive sort of person who's starting off their life in a new country in such a disgusting manner, number one?
Well, by the
two,
way, these people aren't starting off their life. Often they've been here on a visa for a few years, and then they decide to con us to stay here.
Well, yeah, whether they do it through, suddenly I'm a Christian, suddenly I'm not quite what I thought I was, just to stay here or just to get in here is totally immoral. Yeah. And the people who are doing it, they're immoral as well. And I kick them out as well. Yep. Because these lawyers, it's not only is it a no-win, no-fee, it's a win-win. Because they get paid whatever happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this idea, Shaban and Mahmood calling them sham lawyers. They're not sham lawyers, they're actual lawyers. It's like the sham judges, the tribunals. No, they're actual judges, and they're all making a lot of these mistakes. Do you think a lot of these people, they just think, immigration good, or they're just on the take? Or do you think that actually a lot of the people involved in this think they're doing something good?
Well, I'm not quite sure which side of the street they're coming from. Well, I am actually. It's not a very nice side. But I was going to ask you, I don't know the question. I should have Googled it before I came on. Like doctors take an oath before they practice, or while whatever it is they do. I wonder if lawyers take some sort of oath.
Well, yeah, yes, they are absolutely held to a high standard of moral rectitude. But they cannot lie in court. They can't lie on a document, and by definition, they lose their licence like that if that's proven. Really appreciate that call, Simon. Thank you. And I agree with you. Again, I just think most people in Britain, I think, actually are nice people and welcoming people and understanding and want to help people. And frankly, people are abusing that, and that is unforgivable. Let's go to Barry, who is in Norwich. And Barry, you want to talk about this alleged gang rape in Epsom, don't you?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Right. I'd just like to say this, right? The police are feeding speculation by not issuing any sort of description. Yeah. And they wonder why people are taken to the streets. If I was a betting man, I would say it was probably some doctors or engineers who were responsible for it. Probably. Yeah. And if it was a white gang, that would have been white. They must have a description of some sort. There are CCTV around, and shock horror. The people you were talking about, the tolerant, nice British people. I'm sorry, are getting fed up with it. Do you know what I mean?
I really think people are. Again, part of it is not just the risk to people, but also, frankly, the inadequacy of the police. I mean, the police aren't arresting shoplifters or bike thieves or phone thieves, but we'd like to think they could focus on this stuff. They should have a lot of that information already. And if they say we're not giving out information right now because we're following investigations, fair enough. But don't appeal for information and then not tell us who anyone is.
Well, you can't give them information if you don't know what you're looking for, do you? Do you know what I mean? And you see these police officers out in riot gear like that. Yeah. If you don't see them out in riot gear in London every Saturday, you've got the hate marches going down there, people shouting, kill Israel and kill Britain and kill this and kill that. Yep. You don't see any of that down there, do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it is an insult, and it just betrays their view of local people. And again, I read out what what the organisers of that rally last night said. Couldn't be more reasonable if they tried. I couldn't agree with you, Barry, more. I really couldn't. Thank you so much indeed for that. 11:34 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. We could be talking to Roy Ram, formerly of New Scotland Yard. What does he think is going on? That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. Let's talk more about what on earth is going on in Epsom with the police there, and what on earth also is going on when it comes to these the Home Office and indeed the BBC waking up to the fact that, I know this is crazy, that not all people trying to claim asylum in this country are actually legitimate. Let's talk about both stories and more with Roy Ram. He's a former commander of specialist operations at New Scotland Yard in London. Good morning to you, Roy.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk first of all about what the heck is going on in Epsom in Surrey, where a woman in her 20s went to the police after claiming she was raped in the early hours of the morning in Epsom on Saturday morning. She says that she left a nightclub, Labyrinth nightclub on the high street. She was raped by an unknown number of men for a number of hours in a churchyard nearby. We now know, that there's plenty of CCTV, high definition CCTV and good lighting along that area. The police have appealed the last few days for information from locals, but they're not giving out any information themselves. They say they do not have yet full descriptions, in their words, of the alleged rapist. Local people on the street last night surrounded by riot police saying, we're not getting information, we need to know that women and girls are safe. What's going on?
Yeah, I think the police have got a very difficult balance here. If they have got some information which helps them to identify a suspect and deal with the issue of race, which clearly is the elephant in the room here. If they've got some information, they probably need to get that out fairly quickly, because what we saw last night was not just local people. There were people using it as an opportunity to project a particular political agenda. But if the cops have got information that they are following that is going to lead to an arrest, well, they need to say that much more clearly to allay public fears. We're in this odd situation where, it happened in Essex, where there was the police there did not come out with a description of the suspect, and subsequently it was found to be an asylum seeker. There is a dangerous assumption being made by some people, but that's what's going on in Surrey. If the police know that not to be true, they better say so fairly quickly.
Well, indeed. I mean, remember when, last August we were told they were going to speak more openly about this after what happened with Southport, and those rumours went wild on the internet, and we ended up with those riots. But then, of course, when we had the Liverpool case with a car rampage through Liverpool fans, we were told within, half an hour this was a white man, British-born, right, OK, stand down, everybody. But, of course, people not unreasonably looked at this as a modus operandi used repeatedly across Britain and Europe by Islamist terrorists. It was not an unreasonable assumption. You say you think that race is a big issue. I don't think it is. I think it's national the national status. It's people's nationality that's the key thing. Are the suspects likely to be foreigners? As in, did they speak with a foreign accent, or did they speak a foreign language when they attacked this woman? That sort of information. The concern from a lot of people is that a huge number, far too many, a growing number of assaults, sexual assaults and rapes are being carried out on women and girls in this country by people who have been allowed to come into this country who are a danger to us. Undocumented, unverified men from countries where their attitude towards women is very different from what it is in the Western liberal world. That is the concern, not the colour of their skin.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure we're going to come on and speak about the coaching of immigrants in a few months, and I'd welcome that. But and you're absolutely right. I think that the difficult decision for the police, and the one that they really need to be reconsidering today as a result of what happened last night, is the likely outcome of their investigation into this awful crime going to be hindered by releasing some information about the suspects, and if it's not, they need to get it out there very, very quickly.
Yeah. And what about sending the riot police out to this very peaceful protest? There's no hint that this is anything other than a peaceful protest, and yet riot police turn up.
It looked very strange, I have to say, and I would have thought that an intervention by a senior officer wearing ordinary non-combat clothing, explaining the dilemma that the police have got in these circumstances, would possibly have been more effective.
Yeah.
You know, I think that you have to look at the composition of that crowd and make sure that it was just local people and it wasn't other people using it as an opportunity to pursue an agenda.
But that's the same with virtually any event, you know, whether it's, you know, Clapham rioting teenagers, whether it's the pro-Islamic demonstrations outside Downing Street, people shouting Allahu Akbar with the flags of a regime that is bombing our RAF bases, whether it's the fortnightly pro-Palestinian marches. We're often told, well, we don't want to send riot police out, we don't want to be heavy-handed because that will just stir things up. But it's different if it's a different crowd of people, and that's what people are unhappy about.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, if only they did. Let's talk about the migrant issue. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, says she is going to come down hard. She's going to take action against what she calls sham lawyers abusing the asylum system. Basically, people who've already arrived here on visas, but then miraculously discover they need to get asylum. They're being coached and paying for documentation and information to claim that they are gay, victims of domestic abuse, or, you know, they're Christians or atheists, whatever it is that means they can't possibly go home. I don't believe for a nanosecond the Home Office didn't know this was happening on a grand scale. I've been writing about this for 25 years. Why have they just woken up to it?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I completely agree with you. And the idea of coming down hard. One of your callers earlier on said, you know, is there an oath that lawyers take, etc.? Well, they're officers of the court. Yeah. But for me, it goes far beyond that. This is not just a question of a lack of professional integrity. Yeah. This is a criminal conspiracy. And I think that what should be happening here is there should be an investigation based on the Panorama programme, which I thought was very, very incisive. And, you know, these people should be arrested and they should be questioned under caution. And then it's not, you know, oh, you're going to lose your job as a lawyer, because they'll all end up as consultants and whatever else. They should be prosecuted for what is clearly a criminal conspiracy and extorting money from people who, you know, arguably are the vulnerable in society as well as everything else.
No, they're not vulnerable, they're criminals.
Some of them are, but a lot of them are criminals as well, and these people are facilitating their criminality.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, I've got no sympathy whatsoever. They come here legally, and then they're trying to overstay their visa. At that point, they're criminals. I want them out of the country. I couldn't care less. I'm genuine. I'm at the point. I don't care anymore. I want them out.
Well, so do I.
You know, but let's stop treating... Even the BBC in reporting was like these people were somehow being fleeced by these sham lawyers. No, they're choosing of their own volition to do that because they think they'll have a better life here. Well, I'm sorry, you're not entitled to a better life here. Sod off back home, improve your own country and stop bothering us would be my response to that. Let's talk about the police failing to take action on lots of different issues. Amount of times, we know, OK, they send the riot police out when perfectly law-abiding locals are demonstrating. I don't even care if someone had travelled in from London. I don't care. If they were peaceful, they were peaceful. But we're not seeing them arresting shoplifters. They're not arresting phone thieves. They've done sod all about my bag theft. It's almost the 2-year anniversary of that. Apparently, they're also, though, extraordinary. They don't go to burglaries, we're told. It turns out they're also too busy to arrest paedophiles. And this is according to a report by His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, who's found that the number of referrals to police for online child sex abuse has risen by 66%, up 2/3 between 23 and 24. Officers are struggling with the volume of cases, but they're not arresting some suspects. They're asking them to attend interviews voluntarily because it's less paperwork. However, if they don't arrest paedophiles, it means that they don't basically search their computers, search their homes and get more information, which could be protecting children from further abuse. This is an outrage.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if you suspect somebody of a really serious offence, and without any shadow of a doubt, offences against children, sexual offences against children are right up there at the pinnacle. If you suspect somebody of that kind of conduct, you should be knocking on their door at 5 o'clock in the morning, or better, going through their door at 5 o'clock in the morning, and make sure that you're seizing their computers and their phones, and you are securing the evidence. But to say to somebody, would you mind
possibly
to the police
when you get a
station
moment,
it's convenient, it is absolutely wrong. And I think it's good that the Chief Inspector of Constabulary has absolutely identified this. And whatever else the priorities of policing are, surely the protection of children and young persons in these circumstances has to be at the pinnacle.
But we know there's a heck of a lot of admin the police have to do. We need to sort that out to get crimes moving through the system quicker. But we're told, well, they're not doing the phone thefts and they're not doing the shoplifting because they're dealing with the serious crimes. But they're not dealing with the serious crimes either. That's the worry. Can I just finally, I want to ask you about there's another attack on Jewish people in this country, an attack with petrol bombs in Finchley Reform Synagogue in North London. It's not that far from that ambulance charity, those 4 charities that were attacked in an arson attack in Golders Green, also in North London. We've got, obviously, people have been charged with, a number of people have been charged with the ambulance arson attack. A man and a woman have also been arrested after the synagogue was hit with suspected petrol bombs. Wearing balaclavas, a brick and 2 bottles believed to contain petrol were thrown. We're seeing more and more of these attacks. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has said that she would deport anti-Semitic foreigners. Is this a problem? That although there's aspect that is homegrown and anti-Semitism appears to be everywhere, is there a problem also where we have imported a lot of people to this country who have got these vile views and they need to be out of here?
I think that's quite clear. I think the evidence is overwhelming that that's true. And I think what Kemi Badenoch said is right. I mean, I was really pleased to see that arrests have been made in this particular case quickly. But it's the outcomes that we now need to see. It's no good those people being now bowed, perhaps, and appearing in court in God knows how long time. We need to see justice being delivered quickly, and the public needs to feel that it's happening. The whole investment in the criminal justice system needs to be readjusted. And I think there's a certain parallel here between what Lord Robertson was saying about investment in the armed forces the other day. It's very important that we keep the threats externally under control with strong armed forces, but we simply need that kind of investment into the justice system so we all feel safer.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more on that. Roy Ram, former Commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard, great to talk to you. Philip Ingram is listening to all of that. What would you like to come back on?
I agree with Roy completely in that we need to see this similar investment in the police for domestic security and all the rest of it, and to keep us safe on a day-to-day basis. But every example that's here is not a slight on individual officers that are doing a fantastic job on the front line. It's a slight on the higher management that's there and controlling it. And where you've got the higher management giving funding for rainbow colours on police cars, or setting up diversity groups or setting up everything else, they've got their priorities wrong. Let's get back to good old-fashioned, in community policing, and let's deal with a lot of these individuals. I was going to use a different word, but individuals that are known out there, were known to be troublemakers, and these other groups that are coming in that we know are importing troublemakers. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Philip Ingram. 11:49 is the time. Up next, going to be talking about why your family tax bills are going to rise by, wait for it, £4,000 under Rachel Reeves. She's doing a fabulous job. This is Talk.
world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. What's left of the morning, just 9 minutes left before midday. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and let's talk about, well, our finances. They're not looking very good, despite some quite positive GDP news. Quite surprisingly for January and February, from the latest figures we got, things are not looking good for the future, thanks largely to the Iran conflict, but also the small matter of the fact that we are basically not net exporters of oil and therefore going to be highly hit by that, as the IMF has said, and also because of Rachel Reeves's tax rise as well. Things are going to get a lot worse before they ever get better. Let's talk about this with Maxwell Marlowe. He's Director of Public Affairs at the free market think tank, the Adam Smith Institute. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you for joining us. I have to say, I mean, we're probably not, we shouldn't be this chirpy and cheerful, given this prediction that, I mean, this is quite an astonishing figure. The idea that the average family tax bill is going to rise £4,000 plus under Rachel Reeves by the end of this Parliament. Explain why that would happen.
So it's actually all by design. The Treasury will plead ignorance and saying, oh, no, this is just, we inherited this system, whatever else. No, this is by design. This is because the personal allowance is frozen, and so are all the tax rates going through. So as we see general inflation throughout the economy, that trickles down into wages, and we know prices are going up everywhere, whether it's the pump or on the supermarket shelf, or even in services. That means wages go up as well to catch up to that.
Well, sometimes,
that
hopefully,
price.
they do.
Well, yes. I mean, the data shows that we are seeing some increase in salaries and wages. So, but that means, of course, because the Treasury haven't moved, because Rachel Reeves hasn't moved those tax thresholds, it means on average families are going to be paying about £4,000 more in taxation. This
is basically, you know, if you're paying tax, you're basically at the basic rate. You're paying 20% of your income plus national insurance. But if you get a pay rise that takes you up just a little bit more, the extra money you're earning that goes into the 40% tax rate, which used to be, by the way, for, you know, you were the bank
for
manager.
CEOs and footballers and whatever else.
It used to be for the rich bit. The idea of that tax rate was for the very rich, as opposed to completely average middle earners now. Is it about 50 odd grand you need to be earning to be paying the 40% tax rate?
Around about that area. But I think it's also, just to quickly touch on one point, is so when you're earning about £100,000, which, you know, it sounds like a lot, but actually if you're in the southeast, if you're in London, that's actually quite standard for some of our services that are really for companies that are really driving the economy. That's standard. The thing is, though, if you're claiming if you're earning 100 grand, you're claiming child benefit as well, which you're obviously allowed to do. It's in the system. You're looking at, and you earn more than 100,000. They withdraw the benefit, and your marginal tax rate exceeds 100%.
Yeah,
so you're basically
you're
paying
money.
The Treasury to work.
So you got a super duper pay rise. But going back to most people, you know, average incomes are around, it crept up to around the 40 grand mark. If you're earning sort of 50 grand or a bit more, if you get a pay rise, you think, yeah, brilliant, I've got a pay rise, we're going to help make ends meet. You're thinking, well, I get to keep, you know, quite a lot of that because I'm only on 20% tax plus national insurance, which is another big whack. But actually, you're on 40% tax on that extra pay rise over that threshold and national insurance. You're basically not seeing very much of that money. So people feel on paper they're getting better off, but they really aren't. But let's face it, the Tories were doing this for the tax thresholds as well. I mean, what if all the tax thresholds hadn't been frozen over the last sort of 10, 20 years? What sort of salary would you need to be earning to earn to be paying 40% tax rate?
That's a hard question to answer. I think you'd have to be earning around 125,000. So you know, it's been quite incremental as it goes.
You would be well off at that point. You're not
Absolutely.
worrying about saving up for the family holiday at that point, are you? Are we kidding? But this is a load of extra money. And now, look, a lot more people being taxed a lot more. We are very much a high tax economy now. The trouble is we're not a good quality public services economy. There are lots of countries in Europe that have much higher tax rates actually on ordinary people. But in return, you know, you don't wait months for an operation. You can see a doctor today. The trains work, the buses work, the roads aren't full of potholes, and the schools are good quality. That's the difference. That's why people feel hard done by, isn't it?
That's true, and there's a very interesting stat out there which shows that if you look at the kind of, you rank all of the economies in the world, and you look at how much tax they're getting from their economy, Britain ranks at number 3 behind the US and China. And yet we turn around and look at our roads, and we saw this yesterday as well. The Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, had to have her Mini towed because she ran into a pothole and it broke her car. You know, see, that's kind of what it's completely absurd at this point. So,
and
of
by
course, it's absolutely crazy.
She will be able to claim the cost of the damage to her car and the tow truck from the council. And the most councils now spend more money reimbursing drivers for this damage than they do actually paying to actually keep those potholes, you know, under control. It is mind-blowingly painful. Look, we know what we're facing from the Iran conflict. We don't know when the the Strait of Hormuz is going to be reopened. We simply don't know when that's going to happen. And there's big worry about food shortages, about these ongoing shortages of petrol, gas, jet fuel shortages in the future. That's going to mean that prices go up and things aren't on the shelves. That's going to be a really big concern for an awful lot of people, isn't it?
It's going to be huge, and it's a huge problem. I mean, I speak to people in the city who are doing a lot of investing as well. They're not making investment decisions because they don't know when this is going to come to an end. So they're waiting for gilts to, for bonds to basically stabilise. They want to have a bit more certainty. We don't know with this conflict. It's a huge problem. And the reason I spoke about, you know, those investors instead of, what really you're pointing out for, you know, everyday normal people. Yeah. Those, you know, everyday people are feeling that kind of pinch really strongly. And the problem is, though, if the investments aren't being made, it really drags out the problem much longer, even if the conflict comes to an end.
Yeah, so the investments are the things that drive the businesses who employ people, so we have the money to spend. And this is it. This whole business bad, you know, workers good thing is so nonsense. We are intricately involved, are we not? Maxwell, just one final thing really briefly. The Green Party, among their many insane policies, they're planning to spend more money on international aid than is currently spent on defence in this country. And we know we're not spending enough on defence in this country. They want to spend 2.5% of GDP on supporting developing nations by 2030 if they got into power or in a coalition in power. How terrifying is that?
It's absolutely crackers. Only yesterday we were talking about their mad 10-to-1 pay ratio they want to bring in, which would absolutely break the economy. Yeah. And now they've got this idea, which is 2.5% of GDP going to other countries. But also, as an additional point, we usually give out foreign aid as loans to countries, and usually we write them off afterwards. But you know, at least there's some semblance of decorum there. This would be grants, so we would just be flushing money without any accountability into loads of countries which are just going to misuse this money massively. It's madness.
Michael, I'm getting names wrong today. Maxwell Marlowe. I need to learn to read from the Adam Smith Institute. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on that. Philip Ingram. I mean, it is mind blowing. I mean, a lot of those green policies are completely crazy. You know, but we're in a situation where it's ordinary people who are seriously suffering right now.
Well, it is, but you know, the Greens are out of touch. They've never been even close to government before, so they're coming up with just wild ideas that they're making up. They're getting.
And they've never been tested.
Christmas crackers. They've never been tested.
Still getting a ridiculously easy ride.
Yeah, very much
from broadcasters.
But that's yes, and the voters, because it's a protest vote against Labour.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. But you know, again, you know, vote for who you want is fine, but like at least know what you're voting for. Maybe we should start testing people. Do you know like 4 policies? Tell you what they never mention anymore? The environment.
You should have to pass a test before you're allowed to vote.
No, not pass it. You should need to know something about the policies you think you're voting for. Anyway, coming up after midday, plenty more to come. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you and welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. We are, of course, the home of common sense, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, great to have your company. Lots and lots to talk about. Don't forget, if you missed anything from the show, frankly, why have you? Go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour in a few moments, we're going to discuss Donald Trump declaring the Strait of Hormuz permanently open after secret talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. What is going on? Plus, Labour's continued betrayal of women as hundreds of public bodies, including government departments, NHS trusts, local councils, all, by the way, paid for and under the control of this government, still ignoring the Supreme Court's ruling on what is a woman a year on today. We'll be talking to the founder, the director of For Women Scotland. That's the body that actually brought that case to the Supreme Court. That's Susan Smith, coming up very soon. Also, the BBC is poised to cut up to 2,000 jobs as part of a cost-cutting push. What I'm just hoping is we all get to have a say of who gets cut. Wouldn't that be good? First up, though, just let me tell you that we've had the latest report from the COVID inquiry, the utterly pointless COVID inquiry, and that COVID inquiry is looking into basically the rollout, development and employment of vaccines during the pandemic. And apparently they said it was a key success, the pandemic, which I think most people... I know it's a very controversial issue in terms of getting those vaccines developed, getting them out to the general public. It was actually, compared to other countries, very successful. But the vaccine programme in the UK was an extraordinary feat. But the payment system for people injured by the jabs, some 20,000 people have put in claims on that, must be urgently reformed. That's what the inquiry has said. It said the way the jabs were developed and deployed so quickly, 132 million jabs given in 2021, was a key success of the pandemic, along with the speed. This is the first set of positive headlines, by the way, in their fourth report. There's been a lot of criticism of pandemic planning, of decision-making, also the state of the NHS and the handling of the NHS when the pandemic hit. However, they are talking about lower vaccine uptake in poorer communities, some minority ethnic groups, was predictable and should have been mitigated. Also raised the fact of quite a lot of hesitancy over vaccines now as a result of that. They're blaming false information online, a lack of trust in authority. More must be done on that. And particularly also the current vaccine damage payment scheme needs reform with higher payments and a fairer system for assessing who qualifies. There are some people who've quite simply died as a result of those vaccines. They've been severely disabled, severely injured by these vaccines, because all vaccines carry a risk. One of the things I would like them to be looking at in more detail, I haven't had a chance to look at any detail on this, obviously been on air as this report came out, is the fact that while the vaccines largely were a good idea, even though we were lied to, were we not, about what the vaccines could do. We were told they would stop transmission. There is no evidence for that whatsoever, and there never was. They openly lied to us about that, which is an outrage. And then they wonder why people stop trusting vaccinations. It was a terrible, terrible thing for the government and the medical professionals and scientists to have done when they knew they had no evidence for that. But the evidence that the vaccines were good for those who are higher at risk, elderly people, the obese, people with underlying health risks, to take because it would minimise their chances of getting seriously ill and ending up being hospitalised. That was proven. I do believe that for people who are at higher risk, the vaccines did save lives. And you can send as much abuse to me as you want, and I do still get that over this issue, this case. However, basically making it a kind of requirement for us to ever open up again, that pretty much everyone who's an adult get vaccinated, then requiring extraordinarily, asking children, teenagers and children to get vaccinated when there was absolutely not just no proof it would help them and save them because they weren't at risk anyway, but there was clear proof there were risks to children from having those vaccines and they didn't need them, is an absolute outrage. And I would go so far as to say a criminal act, but also requiring people who are in public bodies, care home workers, NHS workers, to actually be required to get a vaccine to do that job. Also completely unacceptable, given most of these people already had COVID, by the way, a number of times. I still object to the fact that I was ever asked to show my vaccine proof anywhere. I've done it to go abroad. I've always refused to show it in any place in this country. My health history is, and my vaccination history is of no concern of anyone else's, unless I'm choosing to go to another country when they have a right to decide. But yet again, of course, as always, this inquiry, utterly pointless report, doesn't really tell us anything new. The inquiry chair, I would say, absolute waste of space. I can't think of anyone who knows less about anything to do with this issue than Baroness Heather Hallett, who's chairing it. Philip Ingram, listening to all that, reading some of the report, I know while I'm talking, what do you make of this initial reports of what the latest inquiry report suggests?
Well, it fits with everything else that's coming out. It's not getting to the nub of what the inquiry should be doing and looking at, what went wrong with our national resilience planning, what should be put into place now for any a pandemic that could come next, and forget about all of the little bits and pieces of garbage, frankly, that they're focusing on. Yeah, absolutely. It really is. They keep missing the big picture every single time, do they not? Right, well, let's turn to something very different. Let's try and talk big picture now with Matt Terrell. He's a Republican strategist and former advisor to Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State of the United States. Matt, thank you once again for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Lots to talk about in terms of what the heck is going on in the Middle East, what the heck is also going on back in America in terms of the talks and the intentions of this war. Donald Trump has, he's made a heck of a lot of statements. Every time I wake up in the morning, I was wondering, what on earth has the American president said while I'd been sleeping that has changed things? But we do currently have a ceasefire in place, about a week to go on that, between the Iranians and the Americans when it comes to this war, not between the Israelis and Hezbollah, though. That is not in place. But Donald Trump has declared that the Strait of Hormuz is permanently open, even though, of course, it's still blockaded by the Iranians and America is blockading the blockade. This is after secret talks, apparently, with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. What does he mean by that, and what is going on?
Well, I think we'll have to see how this all plays out throughout today and this week with respect to the president's comments. But look, I think there's a reality here that President Trump is playing four-dimensional chess in the sense of recognizing the role that China does play in this. China is very dependent, as we know, on a trading partnership between Iran and China, particularly relates to oil. But also China has the ability to sway the regime or what's left of the regime. So I think it's not just President Trump putting military pressure on Iran. We're now seeing that economic pressure in full swing. But part of that doesn't just come from the United States. It comes from China as well. China putting that economic pressure in terms of talks with the regime potentially on full display as well. I don't know if that's happened or not between Chinese leadership and the regime, but I suspect that is an element of this, where you have the China leadership pick up the phone, talking to the regime, basically tell them to knock it off, get to a deal. Because in the end, it's not just Iran's economy that is suffering right now. It's China's economy that's hurting as it relates to this blockade. That's something seriously to be considered here, I think, as this pushes forward.
But this very bizarre situation where Donald Trump keeps... I'm all in favour of Georgia or overall war that delivers the same results. But Donald Trump has a habit of basically talking to the West, America's, Britain's most hostile, enemies, China and Russia, to get them to do things in our favour, when in fact they have been helping countries like Iran, like Russia invasion of Ukraine, supporting them in terms of oil revenues and the like. China is part of the problem, not part of the solution, surely.
But China potentially can be part of the solution. I think it's what President Trump sees here, and with respect to putting pressure on the Iranian regime and tell them to knock it off and get to the table here. Look, President Trump is somebody, as we've seen time and again, is about results. He's willing to talk to anybody. He was willing to talk, for example, to the Iranian regime, have them come to the table early on in this process. Regime failed to do that. So, look, President Trump's willing to talk to any world leader if it means it's going to have a greater result for peace
I'm all for that. Do you think, I mean, you mentioned 4D chess, and I don't remember last time we were discussing this. There's that whole thing where, you've got Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, who can't even work an abacus, let alone a calculator. And although claims to have been a chess champion, wasn't one. She's over in the United States for this IMF spring meeting, basically saying that the war was a mistake. We don't know what the war aims were. It was folly and the like. I cannot wait for Donald Trump to find out who she is and give her his tuppence worth. But you've talked before about actually there's a lot more 4D chess. There is actually something going on here, and this is a plan to sort of, basically it weakens China, it deals with this situation, it brings other big power players on board. Can you explain the strategy, if this is a game of 4D chess, what actually the long-term aim is? Because that's what lots of people are struggling with.
Sure, I'll let the administration speak to the exact strategy here they're deploying, but I suspect in terms of analyzing this, where the administration is at, is look, there's a few key components here. The military pressure that has decimated this regime. I mean, look, the Iranian regime's navy is at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, has been this economic pressure. We've seen that in part with the blockade, but time and again, not just with this conflict, but other conflicts, we've seen President Trump go to the allies of the enemy, if you will, and try to get them to be the ones to put pressure on the enemy as well. In this case, it's exactly what I think he is doing. He is saying, look, Iran's very dependent on China. China's very dependent on Iran. It is up to China now to step in as well and tell the Iranian regime to come to the table here. We've also seen talks potentially of China, providing weapons to the regime here. Look, at the end of the day, I think it's about the end result for President Trump. The end result here is he wants this war to come to an end, but it means that the regime needs to come to the table. The regime needs to give up their nuclear capabilities, give up all the capabilities that would require getting a nuclear weapon. And beyond that, making sure that they push forward with peace here and not go off the games here. That's going to be the key here. And I think China is a part of that, obviously, in this
And it would
strategy.
be great if that were going to happen, and if China plays a role, so be it. But the reality is we've got, religious fundamentalists in charge of Iran who care not a jot about the Iranian people, not a jot about the world economy or these sort of negotiations, who don't care about, the midterm elections for the Iranian mullahs, worrying that, our people are unhappy about their economic lot and so they're going to depose us. They are very sure of their position and they're quite happy to sit this out while the economic harm hits, the shelves of supermarkets in the UK and the petrol pumps of people in India or America or anywhere else. They don't care. How do you negotiate with people like that? Because Donald Trump made the point again and again when he was in office first time around and before he was in office and in the years in between, that you can't negotiate with these people. You have to basically make it happen. And if the aim of the war, as he said in that first speech at Mar-a-Lago, was to stop Iran's nuclear capability and its threat to Israel, its other neighbours, and indeed to the West, then anything that leaves that nuclear capability and that regime in power is a failure, isn't it? It's a defeat.
Well, look, the goal here, priority number one, is ensuring that Iran does not achieve a nuclear weapon. That's key. But look, with President Trump, he is going to either do this the easy way or the hard way with the regime, and they need to make that decision right now. But look, we can't.
But they don't need to make that decision right now. He is the one who's on borrowed time with his poll ratings in the toilet, with midterm elections coming up in November. He's the one who's got time against him. The Iranians can just sit back with their arms folded in their bunkers, hope to stay alive, and care not a jot.
Well, look, but what we are seeing right now is the Iranian economy is in shambles. I mean, look, you are seeing inflation nearing 200%. Every day the regime, by some reports, is losing over $400 million. So, look, the truth is this is a different situation right now economically. We've seen the economy worsening over the past few weeks and months under the regime. No question about that. But this is full throttle in terms of economic pressure. Look, there's going to be a point here potentially where the regime can no longer pay their soldiers, pay the military. Well, good luck having what's left of the Iranian military stand by the regime if they're not getting paid. So, but beyond that, you are seeing over just the past few hours, I think, great optimism among the American people of President Trump. And that's going to matter in terms of going into midterm elections. What's really going to matter is the economy. We just saw over the past few hours the S&P 500 hitting all-time highs. Look, I think gas prices are a major component of this, no question. We saw the administration yesterday addressed that head on, saying how they're optimistic that gas prices will come down closer to the summer months here, during the summer months here. Look, in the end, it's going to come down to where the economy's at in the United States, gas prices, prices in general. And I'm optimistic that that's going to be in the right direction into the midterm elections. But right now, it's about ending this war. President Trump is trying to do everything he can to do it. And I sincerely believe we are very close here to ending this war. I think this is one of the final steps, if not the final step, in terms of this full throttle economic pressure on the regime. That's something that certainly is going to be vital here to watch.
Yeah, and I think you made a very good point in terms of that, the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is, we have 120,000 men, but the reality is, a lot of them are, fundamentalist Islamists, but an awful lot of them are people who just want to get paid, and if they're not being paid, things can change quite quickly. Just finally, I mentioned Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor over in Washington DC. She said yet a number of comments before she left the country and in Washington yesterday that Trump's war in Iran was a mistake. She said it has not made the world safer. Is she right or wrong?
She's flat wrong, absolutely wrong. President Trump has done what no other U.S. president has done, and that is take the necessary course of action to destroy this regime and ensure that they do not have the capability of having a nuclear weapon. We've been talking about this for decades as a world, and certainly here in the United States. No other U.S. president or world leader has taken the necessary action to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear capability. And look, the truth is, I actually think Europe is in more danger from Iran than the United States. I mean, the truth is, we saw how the regime lied about how far their missiles could go. We saw that in terms of launching attacks against Diego Garcia. When you have the capability with Iran to launch missiles that could hit capitals throughout Europe, that is a serious problem. And so I think that she is absolutely wrong. And I think in the end, the American people and people around the world, I think we're going to see this as a victory for the world, not just the United States, in terms of keeping the world safer, the world stronger, because this regime is on their heels, being decimated, and will not have a nuclear capability.
Okay. Really good to talk to you. Matt Terrell, a Republican strategist, former advisor to Marco Rubio. Thank you for that. Listening to that throughout, Philip Ingram, MP, former senior military intelligence officer, joining us for the whole show, of course. You and I have talked about this topic many, many times. There's no doubt at all, Matt Terrell. I mean, look, he used to work for the Secretary of State of the Americans. He's very much on board with the mission of this war. You were shaking your head a few times. Where do you want to come back?
Well, I agree with Matt completely on his assessment of the risk that Iran poses, and at some stage Iran had to be dealt with, full stop. However, I disagree with a lot of his analysis on how the impact on the economy is going to impact the regime and everything else. That's a very, very long-term strategy. They can survive massive inflation going through the roof. And IRGC members are not going to leave and not going to not turn up for work just because they're not getting paid. Because if they're in a position in the IRGC, they're still very influential. They're the ones who will still have access to the remaining food supplies and everything else.
They'll be like the Hamas. They're the ones who still have access to the tunnels for food.
So they'll be able to take everything from the local population. So if anything, it's going to resolve those hardliners even more to dig in. And it's it's a game of brinkmanship. Who's going to break first in this 4D chess? And the Americans are getting the approach wrong because they're thinking of it from an American logic perspective.
But we have this in the West all the time, and we have this with it's Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, and all of that. They always come from this ridiculous Western liberal view. Well, you can just talk to people, just be reasonable. You can negotiate. That's not how these people think. It's a zero-sum game on this front. They need to win. They believe that there is a religious, fundamentalist, Islamist, aim here, and so many people in our civil service, in our political world, they simply don't get it.
And I've just fact-checked Donald Trump's statement that the Strait of Hormuz is open because we can follow the vessel traffic through it. There ain't none.
Yeah.
It's not open.
It's full stop, absolutely. So and saying it don't make it true. No, indeed. Look, so much more to talk about. We're going to be getting a guest on that COVID inquiry, the report so far. I just don't think anything the COVID inquiry has ever come up with is worth knowing. Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor, did more to expose what happened during the COVID years than anyone else by revealing Matt Hancock's WhatsApps than anything we've learned from the COVID inquiry. Coming up next, we are going to be talking about, just a fantastic woman, Susan Smith. She's director of For Women Scotland. She runs the group. She's a founder of the group that brought that case that went to the Supreme Court, which broke the news to us about what a woman was and what a man was, and why only women should be allowed in single-sex spaces for women. So why, a year on today from that Supreme Court victory for common sense and, biological fact, are so many organisations, including the government, local councils, NHS Trust, local, everybody, why are they still ignoring the law? Well, we'll talk to Susan Smith about that up next. This is Talk.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. So we'll be talking about the COVID inquiry, the latest Module 4 report we've had, which extraordinarily actually does say that the vaccine mandates that we had of care workers and then extended but never actually enforced for all NHS care workers would likely to have contributed to alienation and increased hesitancy over vaccines. God, goodness me, Baroness Hallett gets something right about the COVID inquiry. Will wonders never cease? We'll talk about all that coming up. Right now, let's turn our attention to something that happened a year ago. On this very day a year ago, the Supreme Court issued their ruling in a case that had been brought by an organisation called For Women Scotland. And it was a very, very simple ruling. It was a ruling that, frankly, an 8-year-old kid could have understood. And it told us something which, let's face it, 99.9% of us already knew. It told us what a woman was and what a man was. And that the fact of what a woman was based on biological sex, and therefore a man who thought he was a woman or dressed as a woman or even got a certificate legally saying that he was a woman, nevertheless was not a woman and therefore not allowed into women's single-sex spaces, whether they be toilets, changing rooms, prisons, refuges, you name it. Oh, sports as well. But that victory seems rather hollow now, 1 year on, when so many bodies are completely ignoring that ruling. Nearly 400 extraordinary of NHS trusts, police forces, town halls and Whitehall departments have outdated policies still allowing men who claim they think that they are women to use women-only spaces. So what went wrong? Let's talk to the director of For Women Scotland, they say the body that brought that case, Susan Smith, who joins us right now. A very good afternoon to you, Susan.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I mean, on the day, and I was interviewing, some of those who were outside the court, you were celebrating with champagne. By the way, Alistair Campbell yesterday on a podcast thought that was toxic. Just so you know,
he's very upset
toxic.
with us.
How very dare you celebrate with champagne? But it doesn't have an issue with, kill turfs and people standing in demonstrations saying that the best kind of turf is a dead turf. But there we are. We'll let that go for once. But you were out there celebrating, and I remember saying on the day, are we sure that this sort of common sense is going to actually be enacted in law? Because what the Supreme Court said was common sense to everyone until 10 minutes ago. But also they established that that was the law and had always been the law, and yet it had been completely ignored already. So why, a year on, are so many public bodies as well as private organisations ignoring the law?
I think it's just because the lobby groups who previously pushed for this and misrepresented the law were not going to give up without a fight. And we did know that, and they'd had these policies and it had gone really deep, but they continued to make stuff up. Aqua Reindorf, who was an EHRC commissioner, and is
that's the Equalities and Human Rights Commission,
Yes, sorry. She does a fantastic myth busting on a lot of the kind of arguments that come back. And of course, one of them, the most persistent and the most tedious, has been, we can't do anything about our policies until we have this code of practice, which the Equality and Human Rights Commission had written and passed to the minister, and it has taken a very, very long time for that to be laid before Parliament. And the minister has said that that's going to happen in May, so we will make sure she's held to that, obviously. But it's this myth that the law is not enforced until the code is laid, and it's just rubbish. But it's
the code is just a bit of guidance to help people to understand. But although I don't understand, I mean, genuinely, I'm not a lawyer. I read that ruling by the Supreme Court. I mean, you could have written it for children. It's that clear. I mean, it even lays out specific examples, of changing rooms, toilets. I mean, it's so obvious and easy to understand. But this is the interesting thing. The Equality and Human Rights Commission wrote a report basically saying, giving guidance, right, OK, guys, this is how you have to enforce this law. And then that was given to the government. Government sat on it. And then they said they would respond to it. And then even as this anniversary is approaching, Bridget Phillipson, Education Secretary, also Equalities and Women's Minister, laughably, the excuse for not publishing it has been, well, we couldn't because we're in election purdah, because the local elections coming up in England, and therefore we can't possibly publish this, or the Scottish and Welsh elections. I mean, it's just an absolute joke. But we also have seen reports, the Times reported that she had actually asked them to water it down, to make it, in her words, apparently more inclusive. Now, this is about a ruling to protect women and girls. So you only need to include women and girls, don't you? Who else would you need to include?
Exactly.
I mean, hamsters? I don't know. I mean, horses? I don't know. Who else?
It's ridiculous, but I think this is a sop, isn't it? Because it's just saying, can you be a bit nicer? Can you put in some nice soft words about these people? And that's not going to mollify them, because what they want in that code, which will not be in that code, because that code has to be robust and it has to be legally enforceable, they want it to say, you are allowed to go into a woman's space if you feel a bit like a woman that morning and you've put a frock on. And that's what they want, and they're not going to get that. And
because it's illegal.
Such delusion.
Well, this is it. I mean, there are certain places, like in schools, like in changing rooms in hospitals, where you're not talking about somewhere you leave your coat. We're talking about nurses and doctors who are required to get physically changed out of their their street clothes, into their uniforms for reasons of not bringing in, contamination into the hospital. And therefore, they're getting down to their bra and knickers, basically. And, in the case of a number of nurses, a number of different cases, Sandy Peck and others, basically having someone, a man, claiming to be a woman. Whenever you see pictures of these people, it's like, I mean, we all know that's a man. I don't care what he thinks he is. He can wear what he wants. But we all know he's a man, and he's standing there watching these women in their bra and knickers. I mean, I've got to be honest with you. good luck doing that if I was in the changing room, mate, because it wouldn't have worked out. There wouldn't have been a tribunal about it. There really wouldn't have been. I would handle things rather differently, because that is, my view, a direct threat to my physical safety at that point. Yeah. Simple as that. And I think it should have been handled as that way by the hospitals. But people keep talking about, well, this is about trans rights. It's being nice to a very vulnerable minority. And again, Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart on their unbelievably but absolutely impossible to understand popular podcast where they were talking about this issue. And again, two men, two blokes talking about what women should put up with. And once again, they talked about this being a toxic debate and about, you know, the need to protect this vulnerable group of trans people. So I want to put up, for those who are watching, a picture. I think we just flashed up a bit earlier. But you guys were criticised for this champagne drinking and celebrating of this moral victory. We've got a picture here, and I put out a tweet about this yesterday about how toxic that was, apparently. But there's someone, masked people are going on these marches, largely men, sometimes some very foolish women as well. And there's a hangman sign, and with just one leg left, basically you'd be dead once you've got the last leg left. And the hangman sign is the only good turf meaning people like you and me who think that men shouldn't be allowed in women's spaces, is a blank, 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 blank one. What they know, what they're saying is only good turf is a dead turf. Yeah. Numerous demonstrations by trans activists have been intimidating. Kelly J. Keane has had stuff thrown at her, physical intimidation for like 6'5" blokes of a 5-foot woman in public, police doing nothing. MPs standing in front of signs, saying kill TERFs, rape TERFs. Decapitate TERFs. So they're big on that, aren't they? That keeps happening, right? This all keeps happening. And yet we're told it's toxic on both sides of the debate. But it isn't toxic on both sides of the debate. This is not about women attacking gay people. This is simply about women getting their legal rights.
Yeah, and they have to frame it like that because they can't defeat the argument. And this is what we keep saying. And it's quite interesting because I would love, we do have an election in Scotland, we've got one in Wales. I would love for this to be an election issue. Yeah. And for those parties who believe that people can change sex or want to change the Equality Act, I wish they'd come out and say, we want to change the Equality Act and just scrap this section on sex, and then we could have that argument. Yeah. And maybe that would expose those people who really are standing on a very anti-woman platform. Yeah. But because they disguise it under this, we're being kind to a vulnerable minority and we're only, we understand women need rights, but what about that poor man over there who's terribly sad? And they're not being honest. And I think that, we're going to go through manifestos. I know that the ones who support women will come out and say unequivocally, we will stand by women's rights. Yep. The ones who do not will not say that, and that's dishonest.
But we should always be asking. I can honestly tell you, categorically, it's absolutely a factor whenever I cast my vote. I want to know from voters and the leaders of their parties. I mean, Kemi Badenoch, all credit to her, as a Conservative, she's ordered all Tory councils to enforce single-sex spaces. And bearing in mind, this is women's toilets, it's changing rooms for staff, also for customers, whether it's leisure centres, and it's in schools as well. They have the power to do this. This should be... This is nothing to discuss.
Well, it's sensible, because if you are a local council, you do not want to be taken to court because you will lose money, and the law is on our side.
No, the council, they don't lose money. That's the point. There's no cost for them. We lose money. It's our taxpayers' money that is used. But I'm of the view that generally, if they do go to court and they fight these cases, the people who authorise going to court should be sacked because they are willfully wasting public money. Our money that could be spent on schools or public services by fighting cases which they know are wrong. But again, it's all part of being inclusive and being nice, and they think they're the nice people. But it's not nice for women having to get changed or go to the toilet, particularly for young girls, in places where you suddenly are confronted by a 6-foot man.
I think we should be looking with some of the politicians at malfeasance in public office.
Absolutely.
If they are saying break the law, if they are encouraging this, if they are not enforcing the law, then, politicians should not be advocating for laws to be flouted openly.
I couldn't agree with you more. Especially using public funds to do so. I know that organisations like Sex Matters, who are very much supportive of your case in the Supreme Court, and were outside the court on the day. They're just pursuing individual cases, and we've seen taking sports bodies to court, local councils, NHS trusts to do these sort of clear one-off cases to say you're breaking the law, to set that clear precedent. So hey, everybody, you're breaking the law. But that's costly, it's time consuming, and these bodies already know they're breaking the law. Do you think that's the way we're going to have to do this, though?
I think to an extent, yes, because I think once you get a domino to fall, then they start to pay attention. So it was really interesting, the organisations who moved swiftly after the ruling. A lot of the big banks went straight away because they are more aware of the financial implications if they don't do it. And you're right, the government seems to think, or the local authority seems to think, well, this isn't our money. So there has to be some kind of penalty there, because I think with a lot of these organisations, when they are threatened with legal action, they know they don't have a leg to stand on. So that's why the Women's Institute folded and the guides. And a lot of people are making a lot of fuss, but there's nothing they can do. The Good Law Project, which is the most inaptly named organisation I can think of, are still trying to claim that they had some result out of their High Court action. They didn't. They lost. They tried to take the Equality and Human Rights Commission to court over their interim guidance, which basically said what the law says. And they tried to argue it was against human rights. They lost it.
They lose everything.
So they lost it.
Listen, Susan, they're still bringing cases to Ofcom every week about me, about saying things like, but a trans woman is a man. That's how I mean, nothing to discuss. I mean, bring it on. Bring it on. I don't care. If it's Julian Moore involved, you're going to win your case. Susan Smith, just finally, very briefly, what do you think of Bridget Phillipson, who is apparently our Women's and Equalities Minister?
We had a good meeting with her.
After a year, you got a meeting. That's nice of her, wasn't it? To find time. She must have been busy.
Yes. I mean, I do think that there are people who probably, and I don't know what Bridget Phillipson's views are, but she did stress that she does regard single-sex spaces as important. She ran a shelter. And I think there's probably most people, and that includes most politicians, do agree with us, and they just need to come out and say it more robustly.
And they need to enforce it in their local areas. Susan Smith, I have to say, we see a lot of women who sort of think they're feminists and think they're sort of fighting for women, and by doing an awful lot of whinging and moaning. You are a true feminist. You're fighting for the safety and the dignity and the rights of women. You're an absolute hero, and I can't thank you enough for what you've done. Really appreciate you joining us. Director of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith there, on the anniversary of that Supreme Court ruling. Philip Ingram, listening to all of that, I mean, it is insane that the government itself and local councils and NHS Trust and everything are all blatantly, openly flouting the law.
Yeah, well, I think this sums up perfectly the state of where we are with the government with regard to everything. They are given very clear direction by the Supreme Court, and then they just fail to be able to work out how to implement it, instead of just saying, the directions there, implemented, and then the indecision, and then the messaging that they put out trying to justify all of
and
things.
if it's no one's being banned from going to the loo or banned from sport, and you're just going to go in the one that matches your actual biological sex, which you already know what it is.
They're just overly complicated.
You already know what it is.
And cost us money.
You could use the disabled loos. I'm not saying you're disabled. I'm simply saying that a single cubicle. There you go. But you're not in my space. It's as simple as that. If you're a man and you're in the women's toilet, women's changing room when I'm there, you won't be for very long. Just to make that clear. 12:40 is the time. Take a quick break. Going to take your calls. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:42 is the time. A few moments we're going to be talking to Jamie Jenkins, former head of health analysis at the Office of National Statistics, talk about that COVID inquiry report on vaccine being a vaccine rollout. First up there, let's get your calls. Michael's on the line in Birmingham. Michael, you want to talk about the story we've just been talking about, that Supreme Court ruling on women's safe spaces away from men who think they're trans and have a right to be there. What do you want to say?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like that whole agenda, not the trans thing, but the whole woke thing, you know, the hiding of offenders' identities and goodness knows what. Right, your very great guest mentioned a term before, moral cowardice.
Yeah.
These woke people in the public sector, it's not cowardice. Cowardice implies that you're forced into doing something. They want to do it. They're zealots. They're swivel-eyed zealots who would rather protect the identity of an offender than show any sympathy to the victim.
Which is weird, because they desperately want to be thought of as good, nice people. I never worry about someone thinking I'm a nice person if I know I've got moral rectitude on my side. They want people to think they're nice and virtuous.
They come up with that, but it's pure gaslighting, because I'm here to tell you, Julia, that in my experience and my feeling, if me as a white British Brexit voting boomer was attacked at the hands of somebody who'd arrived and stayed in a hotel, they would be more concerned about the hotel person than me. In fact, they might even be glad.
Oh,
they might even be glad.
You probably deserved it, mate. I mean, and that's you're right, and I think you're right. The trans thing is all part of the whole, critical race theory, no borders. Oh, it's a whole load of nonsense. That's all gobbledygook. Pro-Palestine. It's all. I mean, and frankly, and nearly all of it is not based on anything factual. That's what it's all got in common. Thank you for that, Michael. Appreciate that. Oh, you'll never guess who's on the line right now. Delighted to say Georgina in London is on the line. Georgina, thank you so much for joining us. We haven't spoken for a little bit. You want to talk about what's going on in Epsom. We had the police sending out the police in riot gear when ordinary local people were on the streets saying, look, can the police please give us some information about this suspected gang rapist who allegedly raped a woman in a churchyard in Epsom on early hours of Saturday morning. Georgina, take it away.
Well, hello, my darling, first of all, and hello to Philip. I mean, I know that I know that we can't speculate on the identity of these horrific perpetrators, but I can say with absolute conviction, Julia, that these vile rapists that have been white Caucasian men, their names, their pictures, and everything about them would have been all over the mainstream media outlet in a heartbeat. The very fact that the police have not released this information speaks volumes. We were promised by the Met Police that there would be total transparency after the horrific slaughters in Southport, and yet here we are again, the exact same situation with regard to withholding information by the police regarding yet another horrific attack. I personally think that the police have been given direct orders by the highest authority to keep the detainees' information quiet, as this has happened before. And they have done this for one reason only, my darling, and that is because they are terrified that when the public do find out this information, it will light a touch paper within our country, the likes of which this government has never seen, because we, the British, are at the end of our very last nerve with the cover-ups, the filth and the lies. These residents who are holding this peaceful protest are not far-right thugs, Julia. No. They're not bigots or racist. They're people who can see the way this madness is heading. They are people who are genuinely concerned and afraid of the rise of sexual attacks and other attacks against our men, women and children. And they are the ones who are confronted by police in riot gear, while the identity of the perpetrators who've committed this violent, heinous crime is protected. It's absolutely abhorrent. Who on earth are the police and the government working for, Julia?
Well, not us. No, not us, that's for sure. But here's the thing. I mean, no one's been arrested yet. We would have been told. I believe we would have been told. They may not have any idea on the identity of these men in terms of actually who they actually are. They say they don't have full information, but they have got very good CCTV footage. They will have got stuff from local shops, from passers-by by now, and yet we're not given any information at all, yet we're told we need to be looking out for these, perpetrators, and people in that area are worried about whether they're, they themselves or their daughters or their wives are safe. Now, I mean, how can we look out for people if we don't know who they are?
Well, do you know the CCTV? If you park in the wrong place, Julia...
Yeah, they find you.
Honestly, they will give you a ticket in a heartbeat. But I've got to say, my darling, gone are the days when the first rule of government was to protect its people, as we're being slaughtered, my love. And they're actively standing by and watching it happen with no intervention whatsoever.
Yep.
It's absolutely... gut-wrenching.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Georgina. Thank you very much. I'm sure Philip Ingram wants to come in on this.
Yeah, Georgina for Home Secretary, definitely.
Well, we've been saying this for a very, very long time.
It needs to happen.
Run for office.
She just gets it.
The Georgina party, come on,
yes,
exactly. You'd vote for it.
She just gets it, and she sums it up perfectly. I can't sum it up,
but there are
any
so
better
many
than
people,
she's done.
but we can see it. It's all obvious to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, what is the government not saying? Good God! I'll tell you what is Baroness Hallett, the chair of the COVID inquiry, not saying? She's on her 4th module report. Most of it, frankly, has been abject nonsense. I couldn't think of anybody with less understanding of what happened to the COVID pandemic, less understanding of pandemic and lockdown policies, and which, by the way, it shouldn't have been a lockdown policy. But she may have actually, oh my God, accidentally totally by accident, stumbled upon the truth when it comes to some of the vaccine rollout. We're going to talk about that with Jamie Jenkins, former head of health analysis at the Office for National Statistics, up next. This is Talk.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, and indeed we are the home of common sense. I'll tell you, one of the voices of common sense during the COVID pandemic was my next guest, Jamie Jenkins, former head of health analysis at the Office for National Statistics, who joins us right now to talk about the latest report from the COVID inquiry. This is Module 4, looking at the rollout of vaccines. A very good afternoon to you, Jamie.
Good afternoon, Julia. I think when I saw the report come out, I thought, is this COVID inquiry still going on?
Well, there is that. Mostly it's utterly pointless, and I normally just have a sort of a heart rate issue for a few minutes when I look at the abject nonsense that Baroness Hallett comes up with. She spent an awful lot of time during all these reports being far too worried about whether someone has said a rude word about Boris Johnson or in people's individual WhatsApps. But this particular module is looking at the rollout of the vaccines. Now, she's making the point, she believes, that actually, one of the few successes of the handling of the COVID pandemic was the development and the rollout of the vaccines. But as always, anything with a good sign always goes bad, because of course the rollout was supposed to have been, it was very clearly stated by the Health Secretary and others, that it was supposed to be for the elderly and those who were most at risk. And then they decided to roll it out to everyone. Then they decided to actually pretty much try and mandate it to, well, they did mandate it for people in social care, most of whom had already had COVID, and for those in the healthcare in the NHS as well, for children and teenagers who absolutely under no circumstances, if they were healthy, needed it, and they went too far. What do you make of what she's had to say?
Yeah, so I suppose it depends what you want to define as success, but because obviously if success was getting lots of vaccinations out across the country, that obviously was a success. They did get a rollout, but I think one of the things the report talks about is rebuilding trust, and I think the trust in the public was severely damaged by the rollout of the COVID vaccination. I'll just give a few examples of what was going on at the time. So obviously I was across the data talking on Talk quite a lot, and we had lots of data on how many people were in hospital who were unvaccinated, for example. But you turn on the BBC or ITV, and they would pretty much say nearly every patient on this ward is unvaccinated, when the national data at the time, obviously there were some people unvaccinated in hospital, but it wasn't all the patients who were, and it was kind of, there was misinformation being pushed across.
And also the reasons why some of those people were unvaccinated as well.
Yeah, and when you looked at the risk factors as well, obesity was a much significant factor in terms of being in intensive care with COVID. And so healthy individuals, there was very few of those in the population, and some other things as well. So Boris Johnson did his Christmas address, and he was using the words, get the vaccination that will stop you getting COVID. So there was all that misinformation that.
Well, let's use the correct word. They did they developed, AstraZeneca, they developed, and we had other vaccines which were later, I think, proven to be safer. They were developed, and they were. Look, I think there's been a lot of lies about a lot of that work they did to research them. But one of the claims that was made, with no evidence whatsoever, there was never any testing of this, was that it would cut your chance of catching the disease and cut your chance of therefore transmitting the disease. Now, I basically had, even though I'd already had COVID twice at this point, I had my vaccines because I have elderly parents, and they were unwell at the time, and it seemed to me, and I was visiting an elderly aunt when I could see her in her care home, I thought it was a responsible thing to do. Now, I got vaccinated under completely false pretenses. It was a lie. I was doing it not for my own health, didn't have any concerns about my own health from getting COVID, but I did have concerns for elderly people. That was a lie. It wasn't misinformation. It was an outright lie, and they knew it was when they told us.
Yeah, and you're spot on there. And many people did the exact same thing as yourself, Julia, and they were literally, get your booster to stop killing Granny at Christmas was literally some of the messages that were being put out across.
We're not idiots. We just not unreasonably thought that the medical professionals wouldn't lie about that.
No, and that's where some of the mistrust comes in. And then there was obviously, it was a taboo subject, I think, during the pandemic as well. I think Ofcom would have started coming down on people if you even mentioned that there was any harms from the vaccine. I think the report does talk about it. Obviously, not everybody gets damaged by these vaccines. They were very rare, but they were actually happening, and it was a very taboo subject. And the thing that I think when you start talking about the mistrust, I remember they brought in the vaccine passport, the COVID pass. And one of the things they did, because we had that Omicron wave, I think, down in South Africa, where it started there, it kind of ripped through the population, and they were talking about that this is building up a lot of natural immunity. Yeah. But in the COVID pass, that was in there originally, and then they removed the natural immunity from the COVID pass
Even though it was very well documented.
Yeah, even though it was documented. So I think a lot of the trust through the pandemic with the COVID vaccination is having a knock-on effect now to flu vaccinations, other vaccinations across.
But it also had a knock-on effect at the time, people not trusting it. I mean, there's no doubt at all that, look, if you roll out vaccines to, best part of 70 million people, there are going to be vaccine harms. Every vaccine, no matter how safe, tested for, 30, 40, 50 years, will have people who have vaccine harms. And we're playing the odds. But for someone who is elderly, that risk of harm is very different, or fat, or has underlying health issues. That risk trade-off is very different from a healthy, slim person in their 20s, 30s, or certainly a teenager or a child. I have to say, well, the thing that I found beyond unforgivable, genuinely, I would say criminal, was the rolling out of the vaccine requirement to children, and then it made it difficult, for instance, you couldn't travel without your child being vaccinated. Well, certainly to the passports did allow you just to have tests, but either way, it was just appalling. Even though it was against the evidence, against the advice of the actual body that was advising on the rollout of the vaccines, they went against the actual scientific and medical advice to basically try and roll this vaccine out. But what was fascinating was how few parents, who apparently were so terrified for their children's safety, how few parents got their kids vaccinated, because they knew at that point they were being lied to.
Yeah, and at the time, Julia, so the rollout, when they were trying to do the rollout for vaccinations for children. I think most children would have actually caught the virus, so that natural immunity. And now that was in
with no symptoms whatsoever. A lot of them.
Yeah, many people didn't have these symptoms, and you're right. So I think the COVID inquiry. There's not a lot that we're learning from this inquiry. Me and you could have gone down the pub and come up with a lot of recommendations ourselves, Julia, of what you can do going forward. But I think the vaccines and the kind of rebuilding trust is a key factor in what you need to learn. And because if this, God forbid, this should happen again,
well, it will.
I don't think people will have the vaccination program as roll out as fast because of what happened this time.
Well, but I won't be trusting. I still sort of hate the fact I appeared to be so gullible. I was raised by a doctor, so I just assume you could trust medical professionals. But you mentioned the mistrust we've got now, and it's particularly among certain ethnic minority groups, particularly black Britons in this country, and immigrants who don't get their kids vaccinated for anything at all. We've got that ongoing battle over MMR and absurd claims about autism, completely fabricated, made up nonsense, not true at all. But we've got a measles outbreak in Enfield recently. Why have we got that? Because large numbers of people, in particular ethnic groups, are not getting their kids vaccinated. And that trust is broken now. And that is the fault of the medical professionals lying to us.
Yeah, and that's going to take a long time to rebuild that trust because it wasn't just the medical professionals. You had the Prime Minister coming out. You had ministers going out on television. You had the national broadcaster, the BBC, coming out with this stuff as well. So when you've been told something that then gets proven to be false, people will then think, well, I can't really trust what I've been told.
No,
if they told me the lies for that, what else are they?
Exactly. And yet I'm the person who was reported to a counter-terrorism unit in the United States by my own government, for which they've since apologised for COVID disinformation. You've got to see the funny side, eh? Thank you so much for joining us. You've been an absolute star on this issue. Jamie Jenkins, former head of health analysis at the Office for National Statistics. Philip Ingram, listening to that. I mean, one of the other most heinous things was basically sacking thousands of care home staff who'd worked valiantly through COVID pandemic, looking after the elderly and disabled for not having COVID vaccines, and then threatening to do so with the NHS staff as well, which they had to backtrack from because there was such an outcry.
Well, I think if you want to underpin your decision making with the science, you have to listen to the scientists.
Sorry, why would you do that?
Instead of just making up your own mind, as seems